The Port Adelaide chant goes up. 20 seconds. They can just relish this. In their wildest dreams when they came to the footy tonight, they could not have imagined this at all. Taking on the top of the table, Sydney Swans.
Ollie.
They are going to crush them. It's a shocking loss by any means for the Sydney Swans. A flex from Port Adelaide. And in this bizarre, crazy season, this might be the craziest result of all. They win by 112 points. He kicks the goal. They've kicked them all night. And they might just be kick-starting their campaign in earnest, as Kenny might get the run at the flag after all. They have demolished the premiership favourites by 112 points. The indignity of it all for the Sydney Swans. What a blow. Is it a fatal one?
We got the power to win, power to roll.
Alrighty, hello and welcome to the Creedcast. My name is Dave, and as always, I thank you for being here with us. And most on this one, particularly, our most wonderful of reviews is Hooley fucking Dooley. Your Port Adelaide Footy Club won, and they won pretty big, in case you've been living under a rock, because it has been the talk of the football world. An AFL season for the ages, which is chock full of insane results, just saw one of the most wild of them all, as Port took on the ladder-leading Sydney Swans and took them down in one of the most brutal dismantlings of a late-season ladder leader ever seen in any footy league, winning 22-16, 148 to Sydney's paltry 5-6-36, a 112-point demolition. Never has a ladder leader been beaten so late in the season like this. It was simply a result that no one could ever predict, even in this season of anything is on the table. Port Adelaide simply astonished the footy world, and giving us another 4 points in the bank. And in the most unlikely of scenarios, finally we've got the percentage boosting win we are always looking for in games against much lesser opposition, boosting our percentage by 7 points to get to 113.6, which leaves us sitting in third on the ladder by the end of the round. Jamie, there's just so much to get to with this. My notes are all over the place. I've got shit going everywhere in my little iPad notes for the episode today, but just to start off, I just want to know how this wondrous four-quarter display looked from your vantage point on Saturday night.
Hello, Dave, and hello, everyone listening and watching, whatever your proclivities are. Feelings. I don't know what the right thing, where to start, really. Leading up to today's recording, I actually found myself a little bit anxious because I was like, I hope I do this victory I hope I don't do it a disservice, there's a lot to cover, but absolutely overwhelming joy and coupled with shock in the end, and I guess throughout, but it's probably the highest point of elation that you can get at various stages of the match. And then once it's all said and done, knowing the indelible impact that it could make and looks to have made on our fortunes going forward. I look forward to discussing as much of it as possible and giving my point of view from the ground, and definitely interested to hear yours. And you mentioned to me earlier today about all your note taking. It just sums it up, because another thing that we've also spoken to behind the curtain, and sorry to just keep bringing up behind the curtain stuff for those listening, but we were saying that a KO mini wouldn't do this game justice if you just wanted to watch it back. Every quarter was its own highlights package in itself, and if you wanted to get max value, you kind of had to watch the whole replay, or at least a large portion of it, just to relive what was an amazing yet utterly surprising spectacle. And we were confident, but I don't think anyone saw anything close to that happening. Obviously beating the ladder leaders by 100, raising the bat at Adelaide Oval. But that's one thing, but not even close to that were we expecting. So fantastic. And and look forward to getting into it.
Yeah, yeah, there's so much to cover. Just the it's just amazing, just the amount of the different, like the shock of the commentators as we were watching. I got to get more of that when I was watching the replay back today because we're watching it back again today and having the volume up a bit more because I had it low, being it was the middle of the night. Um, and to start with, I was like, often in the big games in the middle of the night, it's a good excuse to turn it down and not let my anxiety get too crazy. Because if you listen to too much crowd noise, it makes me even more anxious watching the games. But yeah, it's just listening to the commentators and they're just their shock when it got to 60, 70 points. And I mean that 45-point lead, the 45-0 lead we had at quarter time, which is just insanity to have a team not even have a disposal in their forward 50 while we go down and score 45 points of our own. That 45-point margin, like I'm trying to recall exactly. I think we were just thinking 3 or 4 goals would be really nice. It would have been.
Oh, I said 13 points.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I might have gone with 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I can't remember
Yeah, I think you
exactly,
went a
but
goal a quarter
yeah,
margin.
yeah. So we would have been happy with that. The 45 points that it was at quarter time, it would have been like if we just maintain this for the rest of the way through. Because,
Yeah.
yeah, watching it at that point, I was expecting maybe a similar, not hopefully not the comeback that Geelong had, but maybe just a similar, like we get out, like once we got out of the blocks, I was thinking, all right, we're going to massage this along, and it just kept on getting worse. For them, it was incredible for us. Where does, because there's been a lot of dissection, and there's a lot of people are complaining a little bit about the focus being more on Sydney. I'm kind of okay with it because I think that is Port Adelaide's performance is big, but I think the story, a lot of the story is we have to be objective and say it is what the fuck happened to Sydney because this was a team that looked impenetrable 6 weeks ago. Their only loss being to Richmond up until 5-6 weeks ago, and even a lot of the story now is they've lost 5 of 6, which is being used somewhat as like, some people that are putting some, blockers on Port and saying, okay, they might have caught them at the right time, which is true, but we've caught other teams have caught us at the right time as well. So swings and roundabouts. But this Sydney team also, up until they lost last week, a fortnight ago, they were losing by 1 point to Brisbane in Brisbane. They were playing good footy at that point, like just 2 weeks ago. And those 3 losses until then were by a combined 4 points. So up until the last 2 weeks, these kind of major, huge issues weren't quite known about. And I think, I guess to give a little bit of credence to the idea that then some focus does need to be on Port too, we obviously went out and a lot of the things you and I have touched on over the last few weeks that we've seen improving ground ball gets and that pressure and just tackling and the midfield mix getting to a point of being really good and actually having the three main stars playing a little bit more forward time, as well as mixing a fair bit through the midfield as well. But they're really keying in on the fact that Willem Drew and Ollie Wines in this form are really linchpins in that centre part. But yeah, it was a real. What we talked about in our lowest ebbs was how we need the midfield to put that pressure on, and now we're seeing what the results can be. And it really was a win that started from the guts and just that pressure in the middle, which is how it's always going to be. But, geez, I think to start on that, one of the best midfield performances I've ever seen from a Port Adelaide club. And it's not like we had one individual star; we had 5, which was just what was. Even Jackson Mead, you could say, was the sixth musketeer in that too at times, and Travis spoke the 7th. But I was in shock and awe, like in a good way, at the end of the game, thinking about the midfield performances. But then when I saw the stats, I was like, geez, it's even. And in that way, I found that quite a beautiful thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it such a juxtaposition to where we were post Brisbane at home? I mean, some of the hyperbolic comments wouldn't even do it justice because it's all fair and reasonable. Some of the commentary that was being leveled at Port Adelaide, and just thinking about our comments and just where it was all going wrong. But at the very core of it, I was big on the fact that we weren't working as a team and we didn't have a team first focus. And like you mentioned, a lot of the media focus has been on Sydney in the aftermath, and everyone comes to know that in modern media in general, the negativity or the negative angle generally gets the most traction. So of course that's what they're going to go with. But I did listen to Warren Treadray's spot on 5AA from yesterday. And I can't remember if it was him or Tim Ginniver. They mentioned that one thing that stood out above all was every player on the field at any one time were playing with an uncompromising team first attitude, and that's the way it looked. And I can't disagree with that assessment. Like when you and I, we've both watched it back a couple of times now. If anything, like the pressure, the effort, contested ball, but it all stems from that team aspect, that team first connection, I guess you could say. And that was one of the most pleasing things when you do compare it to how we were sitting 6 weeks ago. And who knows what the catalyst was or what things they've put in place to address that, but they've clearly addressed it. And that's become most apparent against some pretty decent opposition and at the perfect time of the year. You mentioned, and then I went off the back of the fact that Sydney's been getting a lot of attention, but it makes me laugh a little bit because, of course, that's the angle that's been going with, like they're capitulating, but I sit back and I think, well, Sydney are capitulating and they didn't want it enough against us on Saturday. Carlton the week before are capitulating and they didn't want it enough the Friday night before. And Western Bulldogs capitulated and they didn't want it enough when they played us last a few weeks ago. And I sit back and think, well, how many teams have to play Port Adelaide and get smashed by them before? Yeah, like it's a few teams who didn't want it enough and they're capitulating. It's a few teams in a row, and like there's a kind of a pattern there. All obviously in my insular tunnel vision eyes, it's all centered around their games against Port Adelaide, funnily enough. And Western Bulldogs have obviously rebounded back to be, Victorian premiership favourites. But it just makes me laugh that, these big losses, and Carlton's was not a big loss on the scoreboard, but it was a big loss in context of how the game unfolded and where both teams were positioned at that time. But these teams suffering big losses to Port Adelaide, and they just didn't want it enough. And but it's not more to the fact that we've actually found a great balance in our side, and they're all playing for one another and making the ball their goal and making sure they put it on the scoreboard their goal as well. And it's just awesome. Like I was cheering I'm sure I wasn't alone, but at the ground on Saturday night, I was cheering just as hard for defensive efforts and absorption as I was for the contested marks up forward or the goals themselves that we inevitably kicked. Like it was just awesome all round because we blew Bulldogs out of the water, but the next 3 quarters after quarter time, we only won the game by 18 points after quarter time. And that's probably, like at quarter time on Saturday night, you're probably thinking, all right, well, shouldn't lose this from here, but let's see what Sydney do because they're a proud football club coached by one of the best coaches in the league. Surely they'll do something. And whether they tried to or whether they didn't, like I'm not obviously going to look into Sydney very forensically, but we just simply had all the answers the whole night. I guess probably the biggest indicator was in the third quarter, because that's probably when they did bring their biggest effort for the night.
I think the contested ball was
possession.
Yes. Yeah. You're same page.
But we still outscored them by 2 goals in that quarter. Like it was just one of the most impressive performances in a football game, let alone a Port Adelaide football game that I've ever witnessed.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Before we get into more stats and stuff, just to have some fun for a second, it was just a lot of people have been talking about was this the best home and away win we've had? I think, well, as you saw, one guy just said, is this just the best Port Adelaide win since 2004? And then a few have just said, what is our best home and away win? And I've thought about it a lot. And, I have nostalgia for games that you went to in the past and certain things. But yeah, the more I've actually thought about it, because I immediately, I think the one that said that was since 2004, I can't remember who it was. And if you're listening, no, I genuinely have come around to you. I immediately was just like, well, look, what the preliminary final in 2007 was pretty good. Like, we absolutely belted North Melbourne off the park to 80 or 90 points. And, in a preliminary final, that's an incredible result. But, I guess it's impossible to separate that from what happened a week later. So, and
that can happen in a final, a bit similar to what happened the week after, is once you're out of the game and your season's done, it can just unravel like that. But yeah, just to finish. Yeah, sorry to check there.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, for you, have you thought much about what your best home and away win? More and more I think about it. I just, with the context of Sydney being ladder leaders, how impenetrable, as I've already said, got to find another word for that, but just how unbeatable they were up until 6 weeks ago, and even up until a couple of weeks ago, they were hard to beat. They got beaten a couple of times, but they were still hard to beat. The Western Bulldogs results, the first big loss they've had. I think so. That context and everything about what Sydney were up until a few weeks ago, and then what we were as well. And then just the fact that even if they're on a downturn, and even if we're in pretty good form, that should not ever equate to 112-point belting for the ladder leaders. It should, 60 points, you'd sit there and go, geez, that's a humbling. And that's really, really good. And we would have been happy. We would have been fucking through the roof with that. But with the context of how it went, I'm struggling to actually think of a better home and away, and, recency bias and all that. But still, I've got a pretty good memory for some of the big results over the last, since I was watching them right from when we entered the AFL, and I just can't think of one better when I think about all the context that goes with it at the moment. You
definitely put some thought in. I definitely put some thought into it since, and you mentioned 2007. There was a game at the start of that year where we started that year quite well, and we played West Coast at home at Footy Park. Now, they are the reigning premiers at this stage, and we pants them by 92 points. I didn't go to the game. I was actually camping with my old man, and we're both pulling up the phones and checking the scores and whatnot, and that just seemed ridiculous at the time. And I'm sure at that time everyone's going, well, far out, this is the reigning premiers, that's got to be the best home and away win since whenever the most recent was then. I know a lot of people are comparing. I was on the night, and even my dad was like, is this better than the elimination final in 2014? And that's probably the one that I go to, because my dad and myself, it was just us two. We went to that game.
As did I. I was on the hill.
Yeah. Well, we were in the eastern stand, but we were further kind of at the back and more to the southern stand than we usually sit. But it didn't matter. It was just one of the most enjoyable days at the football that I've ever had.
Beautiful sun shining afternoon. Yeah.
All of that, Richmond had a good run. I think they'd won 7 games on the trot to make the finals that year or something like that. The whole controversy with the Guernseys and just the feeling in the air. Obviously, Ken in his honeymoon phase, as everyone knows, and we blew them out of the water. And that was a final, so finals are there's that extra. Yeah, it means something, and that's not to say that Saturday night didn't mean anything, because it absolutely did. But Richmond, for all their woes in that game, they still kind of hit back, and we kind of managed the game in the end a little bit, and I think it was 50 points in the end.
I've got 55 or
10 goals. Yeah,
I've got 55 in my head, but it might be because we're preparing to record our Geelong episode for 2004, and that was 55 points, so that might be what I've got in my head. But
I think it was something simple. Without looking up now, and probably should have beforehand, because that's what I've been kind of drawing a comparison to.
Yeah.
So that's that. But when you consider that this, for all Sydney's woes right now, they're the top of the table team. We are going into it outside of our club's four walls, just seen as maybe still making up the numbers if we were to make it, albeit the last month and a half that we have objectively had. And to come up against them and just absolutely blow them out of the water, but to smell blood smell blood in the water that's not very good by me, but and just run with it. Because at half time I was like, well, it's just that weird, like, well, do we keep going, or we've got the game won? That's without a doubt at this point in time. So do we manage some of our players and manage the game so that, but in the end, like, it was all seemed too easy. Like we just, and that's not to say it was easy, because like we said before, Sydney came out and offered something back in the third quarter, not, so we had to absorb a little bit, but we just kept rolling. Everything just kept compounding. We didn't give up. We stuck with that team first attitude right to the end. And like, that game is the difference between us sitting fifth and third right now. We made a huge jump. And in that regard, I'm glad that we put the foot to the throat, because we'll get to it later, but it provides a great opportunity for us to maybe go even higher on the ladder, depending on some results this weekend coming. But yeah, to wrap up what I'm saying, that's the best home and away victory for me personally, when you consider all the factors at hand.
Yeah. The one that I had in mind, and that's again comes from us, we're doing the 2004 series on the Patreon, and we talked about the Melbourne win that I was at back in 2004 when Melbourne came to Amy Stadium off the back of a 6-game winning streak. It had just gone to the top of the table for the first time in like 10 years.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
and we won by 12 goals and just blew them off the park. But I guess it was, I think from what memory, it was a bit tight early. Like it just gradual build of a win to 72 points. But that was a pretty good win because Melbourne were in ripper form. But yeah, just the fact that, that was 72 points. We're adding another 40 on top of this one and beating the ladder leading Swans.
Yeah.
And this Swans team was being lauded. I mean, the Isaac Heaney stuff's fallen off a little bit because he did get that suspension, so he's not in Brownlow contention. Should be. I'll say that. But they were dealing with a few injuries, and but we dealt with them through our rough patch as well, and players coming back from injury and whatnot. And we're luckily, and knock on wood, we're in pretty good shape apart from the season enders, really. But yeah, it's just Sydney still had a fairly good side on the park. Like, you look at the names through there. Their forward lines had a few out, and their back line, Rampy and Melican were missed, but just the way we were playing. I mean, it was the midfielders where it started, and that's what they couldn't get. They had to sub Corey Warner off in that. I mean, you were talking about some of the things they tried. The fact that they had to, they pulled the Luke Parker lever in the second quarter was reminiscent of when we forced Geelong into that change.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. Like, we forced a team to make a sub at halftime tactically, and another team to make a sub halfway through the second quarter or something like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it's insane. And this Sydney team was like a decent side in the park still, and that's why I think that's the thing, is there's excuses for, you could have found reasons if it was 45, 60 points, whatever. I just think at this point it's actually that Port just played out of their skins for 4 quarters, and I think that's a great, you brought up the percentage before. This is something Port fans have cried out at times for, is the percent, like, go on with a win. It was a big thing after we were beating Hawthorn by 80 points at halftime last year, and then they came back and I think it ended up a 55-point win, and Port fans were almost going crazy, and like it was almost like a loss on Twitter afterwards. It was like, why didn't we? It was just a weird. It was a weird vibe, but. And I think in this one we would have been forgiven for letting that happen because it was, a Sydney team that was top of the ladder. But the fact that we went on with it, And to go back to something you said before, the working for each other thing, I noticed that there was a few times where our inside 50 game has just gone just gangbusters. Our entries inside 50, the picking out of targets, the creative ball use at time, or just putting the ball into the right spots. But the one that I really loved was Darcy Byrne-Jones. I think in the third quarter, he'd had a goal already on the run. I think this is in the third quarter. I could be
Oh, yeah.
and he comes inside 50 again, and he's on the run. And this is Darcy Byrne-Jones. He misses them plenty, but he does kick them often. But Mitch Georgiades is on the lead, and he just eyes down, just picks him out perfectly. It's a relatively simple kick in the end of the day because it's a 25 meter stab kick to clearly informed Mitch Georgiades on the lead. But that's a kick that earlier in this season and seasons past, you've just seen Darcy Byrne-Jones blaze away, and he's probably a 60 to 70% chance of kicking that one based on, I'm doing the Fox Sports metrics of chances of, career set, but yeah, that moment I picked out when I picked it out on the night. I was like, geez, that's good. Because that's taking a 60-70% chance of making 90% with Mitch in the former years. Although he did miss a couple on the weekend, but still kicked 4. So that summed it up for me, the working for each other and some of the stuff. You just saw guys, the high fives after just little plays. There was another one.
Yeah, picking each other up off the ground.
Actually, that same one, when Mitch took that mark, he just put his hand up and then gave a thumbs
Yeah,
up.
he did.
He just did a really, did a really like, just fucking, I appreciate you, DBJ.
pure love.
Shepherding
for people, like exerting yourself to allow your teammate to excel. Like if again, they made a point on 5AA, like, I could go for that ball, but he's in a better position, so I'm going to block this guy legally, of course, so that he can get it. Like it's just it's an admirable quality to have, that team first attitude. And obviously, we'll touch on him in depth, but it's kind of how Willem Drew plays every single game, and they're all taking a leaf out of his book and fighting for one another. And with the talent that we've got, like, that's when you level up. We've spoken, particularly in the middle of the year, like effort can bridge a lot of the gap between a good and a bad side. But then, when you layer that effort and teamwork with talent, which we clearly have, like, that's Saturday night is what happens when you do that. And your opposition is not up for the fight, essentially.
You put all the pieces together, and because we've bemoaned that at times this year, is like we just see such a good team out there, like in theory, but they're just not putting the pieces together. But the last few weeks they have, and you have to, even the Gold Coast loss being the only one in the last 6 weeks, it's like, you could see, like, we just looked again, it just looked a bit lacking in effort. We actually were pretty close to winning that one if we could just up the effort a bit. So it's all there. The pieces are all there, and they've thankfully put it together more often than not recently. And you look at the results, Sydney, Carlton, Western Bulldogs a few weeks back, the top 8 overall, I think we're 5-3 against at the moment. So it's just like all those things that we've, some of those, notions that have been, and again, worthy of criticism in the past, are just being dispelled at the moment. The one thing going forward, but that's for another day, is, when we get to finals, we've got to figure it out then. But at the moment, you just got to enjoy these ones. You called it as well, and just to giving you a big pat on the back, because you keyed in on the preview last week. Sydney don't start well. We've started pretty well. That could be a thing. Yeah. It's just going right back to the start of the game. Again, this is going to be all over the place for the next 45 minutes as we try to cover it all. But it's just, it's so funny how, because often, these kind of things sometimes don't pan out. But geez, it was just like everything was on paper that we thought, because we'd said they were gettable and we were feeling reasonably confident. But that start, it's amazing that Sydney haven't figured that out. But it worked for us. But geez, I couldn't believe how well we started and how For a few minutes there, I thought we'd left a few opportunities. Connor Rosie was, had a few unlucky ones.
Oh,
I think we had like 3 or 4 posters in this game as well. A couple that had to be called on score review, one that got called for, and then, Burgoyne's, which clearly hit the bar. I remember like when they called it a goal, I was like, I saw that move. Like,
yeah, we did in the stands too. Just
yeah,
had that hit the post.
it's a
Like
clear deviation.
they're gonna review that. Like, and everyone's gonna boo, but it's there.
Yeah. Oh, what is it? I don't know. I don't know how many boos there actually was. I don't know how I heard it through the telecast because I've probably a fair few people in the stadium were like, yeah, we saw that deviate.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, like, once, yeah, there was, I think the Jason HORNE-FRANCIS snaps it around the body for the second goal. Then you've got Rosie finally, third time's a charm, get the third
Yeah.
goal. And it just started to feel like, I was just like, once that third one went through, that's when I already started feeling comfy because I was like, this Sydney team, if it was similar to the Western Bulldogs one, it was like, now that we're actually taking our opportunities, and you could just see Sydney weren't up for it. And I sat there and thought, I was thinking it at the time during the quarter, I was like, Jamie called this. How are we on a podcast calling this? And then like the team, there's this professional outfit that's top of the ladder coming down from Sydney just can't figure it out. But because it should have been known that we were actually decent starters this year. I think we've won 13 or 14 of our first quarters, or maybe 15 at this point. I'm trying to remember.
I think they said 15 on the commentary.
Okay. So, yeah, and that was after we'd won. I think they were saying, yeah, at this point they've won this quarter. Like they knew. Yeah, like 6 goals up. They're like, I think they're going to win this quarter. Yeah, it was an incredible start. And it's something, I mean, we've bemoaned it in years past about because we had some years, and even when we were going to the finals in 2020 and maybe 2021, I think a big issue that year was being slow starters. So it is, I've said it a few times in the past that you start well, you can ease out some of the issues, because we've had some of those games this year where we get into a battle in the second half and players are battering into each other because they're really having to put the effort in. And sometimes you get some of those injury niggles can come from having not taken advantage at the start of a game. But I think that's why you said that we get the pedal on in the second half and put the scoreboard pressure on and continued it until we got to a 112-point win. But I think it's just we stunned them so much. It was like I've said shock and awe a couple of times. I've been just reading some Iraq war history stuff and just remembering the start of that war in 2000. Not that that's a dark path to go down, but shock and awe was the it was the campaign title to start that war, and it felt very similar. It's just like hit them with everything you've got and just leave them stunned on the canvas. And we've got the cattle now. We've got the mix on the field to be able to do that, and it's just like it's really intriguing seeing that come together. Beyond the midfield, it's the defense. I mean, you talking about. I guess we should talk about the defense before we get to the forward lines. Got some good stuff to talk about too, but you talked about guys being accountable for each other. I don't want to single him out. He hasn't played for a while, but it's kind of the big question with Ryan Burton when he was in the side earlier in the year was his accountability at times, and he's been dropped out. Logan Evans, just a gem of a pickup again. Again, your call of making sure Bergman just is more of a stay down back defender. He still has this role to play in the attack upfield, but he's just he is more stay down back, and that's proving paying dividends to a big amount. And Logan Evans again, I think Logan Evans and Bergman are kind of similar height and athletic ability.
I think they're exactly the same height. Yeah,
right. Okay,
which is also the same height as Tom Jonas, I believe. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure he was 189, and I think that's where they sit. Yeah. So it puts that third tool label into context.
Yeah.
And it probably shows why they can be so competitive as in that third. And they're both the third tool, if that makes sense.
That is interesting because you don't think of them as tools, but it's just, I think it's sometimes when a player plays more athletically, you automatically don't think they're tools, but it's kind of like George Yardy's being, sometimes plays just in a way but he's still a tall key forward. It's just he plays so athletically. They've kind of taken that third tool thing, and Sava going now forward. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I just that defensive mix at the moment is just humming along so nicely for me. Again, it comes from a lot of that that midfield pressure forward, but the fact that they've got the fact that they know. I mean, there's still synergy. Like all these units do work together, and them having the trust in their defensive unit behind them that they're accountable for each other and then accountable for the guys upfield. And, Zerk, Thatcher and Aaliyah didn't have to have expendable day. Like they weren't under siege all day, but they still played their role.
They
And
still clocked in, did their job and clocked out.
Yeah.
And like that, Sydney did have some chances to put a score on the board. But whether through immediate or perceived pressure, they just squandered them.
Mm-hmm.
Like our players, whoever they were in that back 6-7, were just in the right spot at the right time. And I think even a couple of their goals came from free kicks. So in the end, they really only earned 2 or 3 goals from their own play.
Their opening goal was an advantage call, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Bergman, I think he gave away a shot on goal to Taylor Adams in the third quarter. At the ground, I was kind of like, he got a fair amount of the ball in that, but it was a bit chop army. But as we know, some of our forwards haven't been fortunate enough to get a few chop of the arms free kicks. So, yeah. So I thought he was actually a little bit unlucky in the moment, and I still kind of do. But they're just playing with such a air of confidence and at the moment, and I guess so a lot has been spoken about, like some of those meetings after the mid-season slump that we're in, and from all accounts it has been led by Connor Rosie, Zach Butters, and then even guys like Alir and some of those other senior guys outside of the official leadership group. But that's a teamwork in it as well. That's the teamwork aspect. It's not necessarily within the line, like defensemen helping defensemen. It's you can be a great teammate as a midfielder, or you can be great teammates as midfielders by putting that pressure on up the field, because that makes our life a whole lot easier down back. That, like, because there was clearly a disconnect and a lack of that defensive accountability from our midfield. And we spoke about it a few times that not only us, but other sides in the competition, some good defenses have been made to look inadequate purely because, their midfield isn't working hard enough. And that's the teamwork and connection between lines outside of teamwork within the lines. So, the defense has just got so much confidence and so much balance now that they probably feel like for the not for the first time in the year, but it's probably peaking at a point where they just go, we can deal with any situation now. We're that confident that whatever comes our way, I have trust in myself, but I have trust in the guy next to me or either side of me that they're going to be in the right position, or they're going to help, or they know what they're doing, so I don't necessarily have to help. And like I said before, like there were some passages of play that Sydney did get it in the forward line, and Kane Farrell, who had a fantastic game, I thought, a good all-round game. Like sometimes he can be a bit one-dimensional and just with his kick, obviously being a great weapon, but I thought some of his defensive help, accountability, and then his run, like who was it? He ran away from one maybe it was Goulden helping forward at one stage or something. I can't remember who the Sydney player was, but Farrell put the Jets on, and he was that confident to get away. But that was after the ball was in contest in their forward 50. And like, I'm just like, my hands are raw, just congratulating such a complete defensive performance. Like, you can be, when you're 80 points up early in the game, like you could forgive them letting a couple of cheapies through, but at no point did they really do that.
Yeah.
And that was awesome.
Even that last quarter, I think Sydney got their 5th goal, and then we scored another 4 after that, and they still were trying to get a few
only
forward.
4, shit.
But,
Zach Hinkley.
Yeah. But geez, it was and those forays forward for Sydney were still tough. Like they had to work for them just to get their 5 goals 6.
Yeah.
And so that accountability right through the end, and it'd be interesting to know if they were thinking, oh, geez, this is a random chance for a percentage booster. But, I mean, it's always just you go out there to play because, what else are you going to do for the 120 minutes, even if you're up? So you might as well keep playing. But it was really impressive that
that'd be infectious.
Yeah, the fact that the continued building of the score, because we won every quarter. I think it was 45 points. I've got I'm just going to go down here. We won
Yeah,
won the first quarter.
77 at half.
Yeah, well,
I
just the
think.
quarter breakdown was we won the first quarter
Right,
by
yeah.
45, won the second quarter by 32 points, only won the third quarter by 12 points, but then won the fourth quarter by 23 points. So we built the lead at every change with reasonable accuracy right up until the last quarter, which we kicked 5-7. And it was really just that last 10 minutes. I think we were at one point, we were 18 goals 11, and we finished at 22-16. So it was just, the last 10
Yeah, it
minutes
was a bit of party time stuff.
yeah.
And yeah, while we've been chatting, I've got AFLX score up here just to see.
I did
like,
have a,
I was trying to dissect how many set shots we converted and but yeah, there's so many. I've kind of overwhelmed myself a little bit, but
it's
yeah, in that last quarter, it was a bit of party time.
Mhm.
Yeah, just trying to bang through shots on goal, and yeah, unfortunately, being a little inaccurate in that last quarter.
Yeah. But that does show, I think that does highlight, going back to you talking about accountability is, yeah, they were playing for each other right to the end, which I think is really important. And again, I don't know if the chance for a percentage booster would have just been just like, Jesus is suddenly there. But I think it was overall actually just execution of what they set out to do on game day. They knew what, and especially at this stage of the year, they're really finding their groove, and I think they're actually having fun, which is a big thing.
Yeah.
I actually heard, who was it on? Someone on one of the TV shows talked about, could have even been like Nathan Buckley or Jonathan Brown on the couch, talked about how they were talking to Toby Green recently. And he's like, Toby Green's just like, footy's just so much more fun to play these days. I think he was talking about just 666 rules and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In the context of our game, it just looks like these guys are actually having like footy's fun. And it's just like they're having a lot of fun out there. And that's boiling it down to a very simplistic thing. It's just like, well, yeah, it is their job and all that stuff. But, footy when you can playing well is fun. But to perform at such a high level is intoxicating. It builds, it's like, it's like a fire that, builds its own oxygen. When you're playing at a level like this, you suddenly find, and I think they found something that they knew that they all knew that they had the pieces, whether it be the forward line or we'll get to that in a second, because I'm just really fascinated with how well we're playing up forward now. But just the pieces, all these guys, Jason HORNE-FRANCIS being a young raw talent, but actually Raws are probably doing him a disservice. He's incredibly advanced for his age. Butters and Rosie being around for a few years, and your Drews, and then your guys in defence, and Houston's, Dixon, who's been around for a long time, Mitch Georgiades being a young one. All these guys have known for a few years, being in a side that's kind of wanting to contest for finals, and the outside expectation is contest for finals. And they all know they're reasonably talented. But I think to have it actually coming together in the last month, 6 weeks, has to just be intoxicating. Like I said, it's like a fire that's just building and gaining, and making its own oxygen and building itself, exponentially going forward. And this was kind of a real expression of that building that we've been seeing. And we've been, again, I said, we've been frustrated at times. We've seen glimpses of it, whether you're going all the way back to that first quarter against Collingwood or first quarter against Geelong. We've done this against good teams this year. It's just we haven't gone on with it, or it's been up and down. But yeah, to have a 4-quarter effort like that, as we said, one of the best home and away wins we can think of, and at the right time of year as well. We've talked a lot as well about blocks, and it's come up a lot the last week, because everyone's trying to figure out why teams that were good at one point are bad now, and why teams that were bad are good now. And everyone's talking about, training blocks and trying to build for the season. And there's even some whispers about Sydney just trying to manage their way through these last few weeks and build some, and they're in a training block, but that doesn't excuse a 112-point loss anyway.
I agree.
Yeah. But the forward line stuff, again, just suddenly we're one of the top teams in the competition in hitting targets, marks inside 50. I think we're number one for I saw a stat somewhere. I think we're almost number one for the last 3 to 4 weeks.
Right.
Marks inside 50, and I've been noticing it as like looking at the stats for this one. I mean, the stats for this one are just out of this world for but 22 marks inside 50 to 4 for this one.
It's just ridiculous. Like you could put your hand into a bucket of stats and just pull out something ridiculous
Hmm.
from the weekend. And I'm sure you've got some tasty ones on hand, but
It's just so
oh
many.
man, like yeah, but like not only that is that there were a healthy amount of contested marks
Hmm.
in that, and then whether that's confidence, but I mean. I think our first goal was the Charlie Dixon goal, and that came out of a contested mark. So just from the word
Hmm.
go, nothing that we're surprised about in that regard. But we've now got two contested marking beasts. Mitch Georgiadis is in such a rich vein of form. Frankie Evans, he even took a couple, like one or two contested marks forward, and like I said, yeah, it's not just marks inside 50, but how we were taking them as well.
Mm.
Uh, that's puff out your chest type stuff. And again, we just look so balanced. And that scare factor that I was talking about last week, it's just everywhere now. All of a
Hmm.
sudden, when a lot of people were saying that our forward line, well, I mean, we didn't even know what our best mix was. And a lot of critics inside and outside the club or fan bases or what have you were saying like, yeah, that's Port's real Achilles heel because we can't kick straight. Who's taking on the goal kicking load, like what's the best formula? And all of a sudden, due to a magnet change last week, and some of our better forwards coming back into form or coming back into the team in Rioli and Dixon, it's just all of a sudden such a handful for opposition defenses. And you sit back and think, well, what defense or what defensive system would be able to hold up to this? Because we're going to get challenged.
Hmm.
Like, um, that's just going to happen, and we should expect that and welcome the challenge. But yeah, it's just like. Well, if Dixon's up the ground, you've got a Sava to deal with forward, and then you've got some pretty handy small forwards running around at their feet, let alone Mitch Georgiadis taking the third tall defender. Like Nick Blakey was on Mitch Georgiadis for large portions of the game, and
He
I
wasn't.
really like Nick Blakey, and
Hmm.
I think he's going to be a fantastic talent for the competition. But he doesn't. He's like every other rebounding or intercepting defender. They don't necessarily want to defend the whole
Hmm.
night, and unfortunately when you've got Mitch Georgiadis, who, as you've spoken about, on average is a top 10, if not top five forward in the comp at the moment, you've got your hands full.
Especially the last 4 to 6 weeks, he's averaging 3 or 4 goals. I think it's 3.5 goals a game, maybe the last month. So he's
Yeah.
even better than
So,
his top 10 average for the season. He's
yeah.
really, he's up to 37 goals now. So
Yeah. Well, I think in the last, was it five? I saw someone post a stat in the last 5 rounds or 6 rounds, he's the leading goal kicker in the competition,
mhm.
Mitch Georgiadis. So,
Yeah.
and like just due to the nature of how big and imposing Charlie Dixon, apparently a much more fitter Charlie Dixon now, and an athletic beast in Asava Radaglia. You just have to put your best defenders on people like that.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, it just offers so much opportunity to the whole six because those big guys they can fight for themselves in a
Mhm.
contest. They're more than capable. And yeah, some of our other forwards are just going, well, this is bloody great. Like I'm obviously happy for them if they're doing the job, but if they're halving those contests, then that brings me into the game and my
Mhm.
teammate. It's just so imposing all of a sudden. And I think this is one of the biggest things just broadly across the AFL competition is it just seems to have happened to this magnitude all of a sudden.
Mhm.
Like we know that we've been building and we've spoken beforehand, like before recording today, that Ken has kind of given a few subtle clips to the media saying like we haven't actually been that bad. We've been building. We haven't been fantastic, but we've been building.
Mhm.
And yeah. And now all of a sudden we've gone from $23 bookie $23 to win the premiership, right down to like $8 or $9.
Mhm.
And that it
And
whatever your
we've
perceptions on
taken
gambling
Sydney out of
is.
premiership favoritism as well.
Yeah. Whatever your perceptions on gambling is, and both you and I don't mind the occasional flutter on something, but
Yeah.
that just tells you where broader perceptions lie. And that kind of sums it up. Like, it's just like, prior to the weekend's game, Hawthorn were more favoured to win the premiership than we were.
Yeah.
Like, from a gambling perspective, and I don't really want to dwell on that for too long, but it just kind of it adds to the whole mosaic of the aftermath and the downfall of well, not downfall, the aftermath of the game, and where we sit within the competition now.
Yeah, and it has been funny watching, because regardless, we've been in the top 8 most of the year, but you've often seen us when I've seen those gambling lines next to us, it's just like, we're often, there's 3 or 4 teams behind us with shorter odds, so it has been funny, but that's a rod we've made for our own back with some performances at times, but it's also, I don't mind being the underdog either, but I think we've definitely made ourselves a bit more known with that result. Speaking about Radaglia down there, I talked about last week just some of those marking contests where he and Dixon kind of worked together a little bit. So there was a few occasions again this week where it was Dixon and Radaglia in the contest, and you could just see that the defenders they had in the contest just didn't know what to do, and either one of them would mark it or it would go to ground, and there'd be plenty around to deal with it.
Absolutely.
It was just watching them work together and these two big bodies just go, and it has been really good to see. Another little teamwork thing that I really enjoyed was, I think it was in the first quarter, Radaglia and Georgiades kind of ran into each other a little bit, and after the contest, they kind of just had a look at each other, and it was very constructive. Like, you go there, I go here. Like, this is what's meant to happen. There wasn't any admonishing in a negative. It looked like a real, like, constructive.
No, it's constructive.
Yeah.
I almost put it down as a SWEENEY nominate, like, on my short list.
Yeah.
Just for that, like you said, it was. It wasn't demonstrative, it was constructive.
Yeah, so Georgiades is like,
immediately knew what had happened, but Georgiades was noble enough to just go, cool, this is what we'll do next time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's just like, you weren't meant to be there, bro, but it's all good. Like, this is where you go.
And look, I did think that Georgiades was on track for a huge bag, and I asked, I wanted it on the back of the Carlton game, but he just went, someone else's turn to get some highlights, and finish with the 4 still.
And
he was well on track.
The couple that he missed were kind of like, it was the first time I've been like, I sat there and gone, you should be kicking those 2, but then he kicked 4 goals too, so I'm still like, well, overall accurate, and you're just in ripping form, so I'm not going to get too worried about it. But it is funny that he's looked on for a career best haul a bunch of times lately, but he still hasn't quite gotten there. So, but he'll get there, and he's playing his role, and like the fact that Dixon pops up at 3, Rioli 3. Did Rioli kick 4 as well? Didn't he?
4, yeah.
And then you've got Houston with 2, Francis Evans with 2. It was a real good spread of goal kickers, and that's, you kind of want that a little bit too. Like, you'd love to see, if Georgiades has gotten off for a bag of 6 or 7 and we'd kick 22, then there's still plenty of contributors. But the fact that we had so many contributors and so many weapons in kicking goals in so many different ways as well, like either contested marks or marks on the lead. And then those kind of some of those moments where they were just working out how to get balls back into the kitchen, like right in front of the goal there, and get guys in with opportunities. Just such a dynamic forward line. I think it's important to note, and we noted it when he was missing, just how important a player like Willie Rioli is to that structure, and just how perfect he has actually been. Again, I've spoken about it a few times. He's the forgotten part of the Jason Horne-Francis trade, but he's
trade. I was thinking about that on the weekend too.
Yeah, and there's no way you can say that Jason Horne-Francis isn't a key part of that trade, but it is highly, highly underrated just how good of a deal that was for us to get 2 players that are absolutely integral in 2 different ways. Because that there's I don't think it's any coincidence anymore now, with the benefit of hindsight, just how the lowest ebb of our forward line. Both came with Dixon dropping down in his form at the time, and a little bit of his probably just fitness with his body and some fatigue at the time. But that also coincided with Rioli going out, and we were missing Rioli and Dixon for over a month there in the end. And yeah, it's no coincidence that Dixon's come back and he's reshaped his body a little bit, and he's got a bit more of a tank. He's still at times the ground ball. I'm just like, he's still not moving as well, but it's few and far between those moments now because. I mean, he kicks that snap goal, and he's like at the next centre bounce, taking the hit out. So
I thought it was, I honestly thought it was a fantastic Dixon game. Obviously, we're biased, but even at ground level, some of the pickups and dishes off that he did perform, it's probably one of the better Dixon games from the last 2 or 3 years. And full team, again, the team focus. We all know that he's the ultimate team man and he will do whatever is asked of him, particularly, going into the ruck, although a lot of us don't want him to be there because of some of what's come in the past. But he was just everywhere when he needed to be, Charlie, and just in complete control of his game. On the weekend, what was it? 3 goals, nothing. So again, while I was watching it, the replay, that is, all that unfounded, I don't know if that's the right word, but criticism on his accuracy. And we've brought up several games, both before and after his form slump, where he's actually converted accurately. It's just another thing. It's just that punish on the scoreboard. And in the ruck, I thought it was really interesting having a young ruckman in Jordan Sweet and then Charlie Dixon as the chop out. In the rooms at halftime, there was just a slight piece of vision. And I wasn't focusing on them, but I could just see them talking with Matthew Lobe, and Charlie's fully invested. They were obviously discussing how to combat Brodie Grundy, I would imagine, because Peter Laddam's a mere afterthought, really. But Dixon was really involved with the conversation, and then Jordan Sweet was in conjunction with Lobe offering some advice on how to position and what they should potentially try and do in the second half. And it just kind of epitomized Dixon's, he wasn't with the forwards in that moment, although at halftime he probably spent his fair share of time with the forwards, but he was also invested in that little ruck conversation of how they can actually just continue the advantage that they'd built for the team in that area. And that all just goes into that whole basket that we've been talking about now.
Yeah. I assume the forwards meeting at halftime was just fucking good job, lads. Keep going.
Keep going.
Georgiades is sitting there with 4 goals at halftime. It's just Ken just goes, yeah, fucking thumbs up, lad. Go on.
I could forgive them for eating a Zinger box at halftime if they really wanted to. Pour a beer.
Yeah. Really interesting. It's great to bring up Sweet again because, again, I think, this is one of the games against, Brodie Grundy's been pretty highly praised this year for his time at Sydney and having just gone in there after an indifferent few years. So another, I think we just scroll down to I've got my hit out stats in particular right here. Sweet had Brodie Grundy won the hit out battle as far as total hit outs, but he didn't, he had 32 hit outs for 8 to advantage. Sweet had 22 hit outs, but 11 to advantage. So we're talking about 50% versus 25%, hit out to advantage rate. And, then if we look at the chop outs, Laddams had 10 hit outs with 4 to advantage, and Dixon had 8 with 3 to advantage. So the chop out was pretty even. But Dixon's obvious win around the ground overall with the 3 goals down forward and goal assists. He was dishing off a few handballs and all that kind of stuff. It's just fucking beautiful to watch. Dixon, it's always been an underrated part of his game, just how good he is at figuring out the play when he's not the one kicking the goal. He's got a good eye to our structure and understands how we play. And knows where the runners are going to be and knows and kind of just is already turning around with the handball in mind, just knowing someone's going to be there. I think the Darcy Byrne-Jones one might have come at the start of the second quarter, might have come for a Dixon handball. I might be misremembering that, but
absolutely was.
it did. Yep. And then Sweet. I love a ruckman just finds a way to get a goal, and Sweet had that goal, which was really nice, and then that kick that the commentators were just absolutely just glazing.
That one,
the one that was so good that it had two Port guys. It was Rioli and Evans that would go. Francis Evans, that is. I have to remember now that I have to, whenever I speak of an Evans, I have to. It has to be L Evans or F Evans, which is a good problem to have if they're both in the side playing well. But yeah, that sweet kick later in the game, I think it was fourth quarter. And the fact that he's opened himself up out in the wing, and run into space, it just shows his athletic ability in his tank, because that's later in the game.
Absolutely.
And then to lace out just this beautiful kick that had the commentators going, that is a fucking beautiful kick. Oh, they didn't say fucking.
But don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Hutto was in commentary. I think he did say something similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ruckman aren't supposed to do that, are they?
It was a fun
comment. Loves that line.
Yeah. Geez, it was fun comment. We'll get back to the game in a second, but just a side note, the commentary was really funny because Derm just started, Derm got a warning from Hutto, in the game. Did you notice that?
Yeah, because the game was getting away, and just
our producers get
at risk of some interesting topics.
Because he's just oh, look at this Scooby, and then he's just and then Adams comes on the screen, he's just oh, and that's Shaggy, and because
Shaggy,
for those unaware, there was a guy dressed as Scooby-Doo, dressed in the front row of down in the scoreboard pocket, I think it was. Kind of in that area, I think, if I'm remembering.
It was either that pocket or the diagonal.
Because
I can't remember. Yeah,
wait, was someone?
It was in.
I think
that. Just in the Western stand.
Yeah, actually, might have been. Yeah, it might have been. Side. Yeah, it might have been the opposite one. But guy dressed as Scooby Doo. Would love to know the story as to why someone decided to go to the game dressed as Scooby Doo. Don't know if maybe there was a Bucks show on or something. You never know. But But then he starts talking about Shag, and I'm sure Hutto was just just don't get into any of your activities in the 80s with obviously the underlying current of Scooby Doo and Shaggy and substances that the Mystery Machine. I don't know if that's where Hutto was going. He's just Derm's getting into it, and it was just warning Derm about.
Derm was just getting hyper excited. Yeah, and I actually wrote a note because obviously the Olympics are on, so there's a few.
They are?
I don't know if this was a result of it, but I think there's a few Fox personalities in France at the moment. So we got a bit of an interesting team for the game on Saturday night, and so there's just a couple of notes about Derm, just referring to everyone by their first name, which I instead of saying what do you think about that, Roo? He's just oh, I actually disagree, Mark. And then Anthony at the start, he
I didn't notice it.
Went back with a few nicknames throughout the call, but for the most part, it was Mark, Anthony. He did say Dicko, but I was just okay, yeah, cool. Because I think Rashudo was not criticizing heavily, but just saying Dixon had his bounce back game against Bolter, but then he didn't really feature in the Carlton game, and
he got corrected.
I disagree, Mark. And I was whoa. Dermy's marking Mark Rashudo, first naming him. And the point that he brought up about Dixon taking away Wiedering, we spoke about that. And I
did actually. I was going to bring that up. So that's good. That's a good thing to bring up about what Dixon's been doing since he came back. It's actually a 3-week block that's been really, really good. His role against Wiedering is what opened up some of that forward line stuff, and then again this game just even more so. He takes away, and Radaglia obviously is goal kicking. I actually just on Radaglia for a second. We're bouncing around. This is what this podcast was always going to be, with just so much to talk about. But Radaglia kicked 1 goal 4, which isn't a great return. I actually don't. His kicks were always. I think all of them were pretty dead-eyed dick, struck well. It's just just whether it's just how he's angling through, and so. Yeah, some work to be done there, but I think it was. I think it might have been Derm actually that just said there's always a place for a big bloke that can just get the ball, take the marks, be present often. Because I mean, that's been probably the issue with Todd Marshall at times. He just floats in and out of the game. Whereas Radically, it was just always there. Whenever the ball's going, he's making a contest and making it really tough on the defenders. And then obviously, yeah, when you've got a body that like in a similar frame, that is suddenly like now there's two big bruising bodies like to deal with for the defenders rather than just because Dixon's often been just that one big bruising body, and obviously we want Ollie
and now
Lord
you can't put 2 or 3 defenders.
You can't double team him because then you could maybe do, there's the old thing in the NBA with Shaq, like if you get him at the free throw line, like the Hacker Shaq tactic was just like let Shaq take the free throws because he's going to miss. But I think Radicalier, like you could say, well, you target Dixon and then hopefully Radicalier just misses more than he kicks, but. I think the more time he gets up forward, he'll figure that out. And even if he gets 6 chances of the game and he's kicking 3 goals 3, 2 goals 4, yes, you'd hope that he's converting more, but he's going to get his chances. So it's a really tough headache for the defender.
He's had 8 shots on goal in 2 weeks,
and kick 3 goals 5. So a reasonable return for a bloke was a defender up until the last couple of weeks. So
and that was Willie Rioli in the previous 2 games. So obviously different players and different goal kicking situations for the most part, but I agree with absolutely with that. To have a big guy that's marking it like he can.
Mm-hmm. Looks like he's having fun
and
too.
And like you said, the kicks by and large were pretty good kicks and pretty straight.
They weren't shanked.
I think it just comes down to he just needs to place it on his
it wasn't
boot.
it wasn't
needs to drop it a bit closer to his foot just to really make sure of it. But I'm sure he's spending a bit more time with Chad Corns this week than perhaps last week or the week before. So hopefully it's just an easy fix and he can go on with it because that's scary.
Yeah, it is. Again, on the I wanted to touch on the commentary because it was really fun. It was just so much fun to listen to. The shock and horror of when we got out to 70 points, and you just got Derm just finally go, this is going to leave scars. Like,
and I mean, it's an interesting.
Can they emotionally recover from this and all that stuff? I was just being the fan, and I feel for Sydney. Like, I'll say I feel for Sydney fans because we've been there, and certainly in some high profile situations, we get it. But it is nice.
They wouldn't have been watching at that point in time anyway.
I mean, it's Sydney, isn't it? That's facetious, but it was it was like, this is soul destroying stuff. This is going to leave scars. Can they emotionally recover? It was real cut, salt in the wound. Like it wasn't just dancing around. It's just like, this is the kind of stuff that can derail a season. Now I think it's professionals and whatnot, and I think that it's just, especially this season, there's a lot of evidence out there for you can have a really bad day and still be a pretty good football team. But it's an interesting one. It's good to be on the other side of it. But it was just it was a game that I just really enjoyed listening to commentary is really my point. Like, it's just like, it's fun to be a part of a game when you're on that side of it and getting that kind of, because that in turn, like, yes, that's focused on Sydney, but that in turn is a compliment to yourself that this is what you're doing to this team, that you're bringing out these, Victorian commentators and whatnot to just sit there in utter shock and wonder if a team that it was once just completely unbeatable and a fortress of a team in every way is suddenly just being soul destroyed by the Port Adelaide Footy Club.
I was actually having a conversation with my old man on Friday night. Actually babysat my daughter and went to pick her up and had dinner with them. We were just chatting, casting our minds forward to Saturday night and, just speaking about Sydney and how good of a year they'd had and like they'll be hard to beat and whatnot. And some of these comments seem funny in retrospect, but but I'd been thinking about that earlier in the week, obviously after we'd recorded and discussed it a little bit, but it couldn't help but draw my mind back to us last year and just that fact that we played so well for such an extended period of time, but ultimately it was at the wrong time of the year. And coming off the back of the Carlton loss in their from their point of view, for making them fall down the ladder. And I said, well, yeah, but to Dad, I said, midway point of last year, everyone was saying Port and Collingwood, and you know, that's going to be the grand final. And credit to Collingwood, they kept on keeping on, and maybe had a bit of luck along the way in finals, getting their noses in front in all of those matches, and credit to them. But we unfortunately fell off the perch, and
Mm.
that's kind of seemingly is what's unfolding when it comes to some of those teams this season, who it was, Sydney and Carlton at the grand final, and thanks everyone else for coming, basically.
Yeah,
It's completely changed.
the June flag contenders is always fraught with danger. It can often be, particularly in a lot of previous years, and maybe back to when there was, it wasn't the pre-finals bye. You'd often start getting an idea, but we've learnt, particularly with the modern AFL and 666 rules and all that. It was really interesting listening to Chris Scott on AFL 360 talk about you hate it as a coach, but you love it as a fan, and like,
Yeah.
but you love it when it's going for you. But when it depends on what situation of the game you're trying to defend. But it is, the modern game is just, there is a lot of differences to it, and I think mostly good in those. Like, I like the 666. I think it just does, and it has worked, and it does work for us pretty well when because we just do have the players to kind of exploit that, and we're built to handle it. But it can go against you pretty easily. But yeah, it was just that kind of, all that chat. It was just like, it kind of felt like I like, I'm sure you do too, but the movie Gladiator, I just fucking love it.
I watched it
always,
recently.
yeah, it's so good. I'm looking forward to the second one. It could be an absolute disaster, but I'll still go watch it because it'll be fucking swords and sandals and blood and a fucking coliseum full of water. Can't wait. But I thought, like, just watching the demolition, and I just thought of that scene in the first, like the original Gladiator, the only one at this point, when the Battle of Carthage recreation, and obviously Russell Crowe's Gladiator Maximus like organizes the gladiators to overturn what's
they
meant to
changed the
happen.
script. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought of, like, when Joaquin Phoenix is like Emperor just turns around to the fucking dude that's organized it and just goes, "My history is hazy, Cassius, but you know." Isn't Port meant to lose? And the guy's just like, "Oh yes, I'm sorry, sir." Like, just,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, we were the gladiators.
yeah, because it was just, we just flipped, and that's giving a little bit. We should note that we were actually, I did have a look at the betting right before the game. Again, just, this is, gamble responsibly, but it is just always interesting to see where the money goes, and we were $1.88 to $1.92 favorites. It's pretty much, even, but we were slight favorites by game time. So it just does show that a lot of punters were putting money towards Port in the week leading up and taking the money, and it put us towards favorites. But as far as the script goes, it was, Sydney were the ladder leaders, and I tipped Sydney. I've done it a lot in 50-50 games. My superstition is I'm picking against this because I win. I
Win-win.
Yeah, but obviously take our win. I don't care about my tipping when it comes to Port. So, but yeah, it really just was a script flip game, and it was the Battle of Carthage in Gladiator. But yeah, I know there's a lot we need to get to, but I feel like the stats, we've got plenty of time to still get to, plenty of things to get to. Did you have anything in particular game-wise general before we get to segments and stats and all that? Because I know we'll probably be pretty heavy in there.
I just a couple of funny things that I thought a lot that I just wrote down after watching the replay again, and back to Dermot and the commentary. But like, once we were out to that 7 or 8 goal lead, I think Mitch Georgiades gave away a free kick for like pushing in the back.
He gave a couple of those, yeah.
Yeah, and then Dermot just kind of tapped into that like dark arts education, and he kind of just like advocated for the fact that he's like, yeah, well, when you're 7 goals up, you can kind of test your waters there, and if it works, you got a shot on goal, and if you don't, well, you're 7 goals up, so it doesn't really matter. And I love that because, yeah, Dermot would be a high proponent of of the dark arts, as it were. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I love that. This is part of the commentary on the night, like you said, Hutto having to rein him in a little bit. Like, and look, Dermot does love the sound of his own voice, but
Mm.
he does just love football too. And so, like the Jason Horne-Francis, that stationary kick, like Dermot's assessment of that snippet of play was just blown out, but just because he loves football so much, and I guess he knows how hard it is to play football at the highest level. So when footballers perform kind of niche acts, or yeah, if there's a little dark arts on the horizon, like yeah, he just loves it and loves to tell you about it as well because
Mm.
he's been there and done that. I thought, yeah, particularly the advocating for pushing people in the back
Yeah.
to try and sneak another goal in because again, maybe as well as that, also knowing that the umpires can be quite gullible
Mm.
and just kind of deer in headlights sometimes when play unfolds. And yeah, I love that. The other funny thing was, and this is from the game, and again, it's probably something that I should have mentioned earlier in terms of like just feeling on the ground and whatnot. But the standing ovation that
Mm.
was performed at quarter time, again, electric. Like everyone was, while we were all enjoying the goals, everyone was waiting for the quarter time siren just so we could all stand up and clap and cheer. That was amazing, a great moment of unity. But what made it even better was, and I thought it was the Adelaide Oval ground staff, but it was actually the vision from the Fox Footy telecast, was they panned and zoomed in on the old scoreboard, but they zoomed in on Sydney's 0-0-0. And so while everyone's doing a standing ovation, you see that on the big screen, and then everyone's like, yeah, yeah, like just like I want more, more,
Mm.
like Adam Driver in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, give me more. Oh, that was awesome. And then when I watched the replay, I was like, oh, it was the Fox Footy telecast. It wasn't the ground
Mm.
staff, but I thought, oh yeah, look at these guys over here just shitting on Sydney while they're away from home. And then it happened again when Sydney had their first shot on goal.
They showed
And
the 1 point
again,
on
they
it. Yeah.
panned to the scoreboard. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, there's just a
Oh,
couple of notes from the game that I really enjoyed from a absolutely enjoyable game of football.
yeah, there was vibes, there was aesthetics. It's just like, yeah, the fact that shout out to Steve, friend of the pod, who sent me, he must have been sitting near the score, but he just sent me a photo through of the scoreboard at halftime, and I was just like, fuck, that's good. I used it in the edited it up a little bit to fit into my game, my full time graphic. But yeah, it's just like
Yes,
the fact
yes.
that yeah, just to see that score like 86-9 at halftime just is, that's just a touch. Just to quickly, someone, I think one of the shows touched on it as well. Just the fact we've kept Western Bulldogs to a Footscray as they are this week. I'd like them to go back to Footscray full time as well. But yeah, keeping them to a reasonably low score. Carlton, we kept to a low score because Carlton at Marvel, I think, were averaging over 100 points this year. So we kept them to 35 points below that. And
Hmm.
then and then keep a Sydney to just keeping a team, any team. You could be keeping Richmond or North Melbourne,
Mm,
and we didn't keep them to that lower score.
that's
Keeping
exactly
any
right. Yeah.
keeping any team to 36 points in an AFL, a modern day AFL game, is very, very difficult. We kept the fucking top team to 36 points. It is
Yeah,
insanely
yeah.
difficult to keep teams below, even if you're blowing them out, to below 40, 50 points, and we did that. So
Well, yeah,
incredible.
like in 6 quarters of football, we've conceded 6 goals
And we
and
scored
change. Um,
and we scored
like
29 of our own.
yeah, was that on the couch, that graphic, or
Yes,
was it
yeah,
on AFL's?
I
Yeah.
think it was on the couch. Yeah,
Just
um,
silly. Like that
yeah,
differential in score for the last 6 quarters that we've played. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier in the season, like at three-quarter time against Carlton at Adelaide Oval, like our soul got ripped out, and the next month was pretty difficult
hmm
by all accounts. And then yeah, at halftime of the Carlton game, it's like we found our soul again.
yeah,
Because yeah, what's unfolded in the last 6 quarters is inconceivable,
yeah,
for want of a better term. But yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
just real fascinating.
scoring 20 goals in any game in AFL these days is pretty good as well because it's just not quite the game it was when we were growing up, which is fine. I think it's a great game still. It's just different.
Yep.
I'm not going to be one of those guys that was better back in my day. It's just different, but it's still good.
We know that from going back to the '04 season and just
Yeah,
looking at some of the games that were played out in that year and some of the scorelines, and yeah.
yeah,
So we know that, yeah, you can romanticize past eras, but yeah, football's never really been perfect and it probably never really will be, but it's pretty
yeah.
fucking good.
It's just always evolving, and as
Yeah,
we always say, we just love footy.
we sure do.
Alrighty. I know that we should get into the segments because there's just going to be so much. I think the stats and stuff is going to be really fun this week. Uh, Alrighty, a little quick interjection here, just doing a little bit of advertising in pod, just for our own stuff. Just a reminder, get around our socials, the Creed _ the Creed or the Creed 1870 on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those places that you can find us and interact with us and all the content out there. And just a reminder as well, our Patreon is live, links in the bios, but you'll see it on the screen here as well. Patreon.com/thecreed1870. The first of our 2004 episodes is there. The second one is being recorded this week. The first one covering the regular minor round of 2004. The second one that we're recording this week is going to be all things the Geelong qualifying final, which was such a wonderful day out at Footy Park back in 2004, and it kick-started our finals campaign in earnest as we beat Geelong and went on our way to the preliminary final. So we're talking about Geelong this week and that wonderful qualifying final that it was. Otherwise, yeah, there'll be a bit of other stuff coming to the Patreon as well. I'll start doing some random little 15, 20-minute chats about different things that are happening in the AFL world. I'll have something about the finals changes that are possibly coming tomorrow or Thursday. And there's just other stuff coming as well. Keep an eye out on the socials, on the YouTube as well. Subscribe on YouTube. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us likes on the videos. That'll be really helpful. It just helps get the podcast out there when YouTube recognizes more interaction with the videos. And that goes the same for Spotify and Apple Pods and all that stuff. Like, subscribe, give us 5 stars there. That would be awesome. And yeah, there'll be more coming to YouTube as well. I'm going to start doing some stuff with my Port Adelaide Footy cards and just showing off some of the collection and some of the collecting journey. I'm going to continue on trying to find some of the harder to find Port Adelaide cards heading into 2025. Lots of stuff coming as we head into 2025 as well. I've got a lot of stuff that I'm looking to do. Expand the podcast, of course, the regular weekly show reviewing everything as you're listening to here right now. Will always be here free and available for everyone. But yeah, get around the Patreon if you can. That helps support us and helps us keep doing what we're doing. That's about it. Let's get back to it and get into the segments. Alrighty, so before we get into all the other fun stuff in the segments, we'll get to a spotlight this week, and we're changing it up this week because we're not fucking putting a watch list on anyone because everyone is fucking fantastic this week. It's good vibes. We can do yeah. This is our podcast, and we can do this, and we're not gonna just pick out someone to watch list in a constructively critical way if we don't have to. And this week, just everyone deserves a pat on the back. But we'll do spotlight, and instead of doing, obviously spotlight watch list, we're just going to do 2 spotlights each, which, Jamie, you get to go first. It's like a little mini draft, I think, this week. So you get to spotlight first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the balls going around in the bingo ball machine or the cross lotto.
2 fat ladies.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever. I'll do what I want. So yeah, on that note, my first spotlight is Lockie Jones. Spent a lot of time talking about, we spent a bit of time talking about him last week. I believe he was on the watch list last week.
He was my watch list last week.
But we also discussed the reality of young men coming into the professional football and the fact that it was his 50th game on Saturday, so still fairly inexperienced up until that point. And I think it was in the commentary on Saturday night said that it was a bit of a coming of age game for him, and I somewhat agree with the sentiment, although I do think that his game against Adelaide earlier in the season was one of his better games of his career, and his game against the Western Bulldogs as well. Recently was up there with one of his better ones, but it was perhaps the sense of control and surety with his decision making, sorry, that stood out. Like he led us for intercept marks, and that was obviously a key feature. It's something that looks good as well.
Hmm.
Like when you're coming across to help out and just being so strong, a behemoth of a man like well, a behemoth of a young man, I should say. And he finished with 14 disposals, and he went at 92.9% disposal efficiency. So just yeah, cool. Like you could categorize it in that group of coming of age games if you want, or you can single it out if you want, because in a game like that, every emotion's kind of amplified to the positive when we're talking about our own team. So yeah, but I just thought it was really interesting to see how he performed, particularly after we discussed him in a bit of depth last week, and yeah. If not his best, he had one of his better games of his early career, a young career. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. He would have been my top pick for the spotlight as well. So, which is just, yeah, it is good to see that parallel just from last week when we are just like, we don't know exactly where he fits still and just if he knows his role. But yeah, this week he really kind of, yeah, keyed in on it and was a really, really fundamental part of that back, that kind of wall that we had at the back to stop any real Sydney attacks going forward. All right, my next pick on my list for the spotlight was Charlie Dixon. Had to obviously have talked about him a fair bit with his stats and whatnot, but yeah, he's just I think he's been in the watch list times this year. He's been in the spotlight. He's had a real interesting year, but have to
yeah,
just give him a spotlight as well because he's really, as I said earlier, he's key. Like the forward line has become so much more dynamic with him and Rioli coming back as well. But him being in the former years has opened up the opportunities in the forward line and just made opposition defenses suddenly have to work so much harder than they did when we were, as much as I hope that Todd Marshall's still got a role going forward, Ollie Lord still, young and raw, and Marshall is actually, reasonably young, but it's when we were playing with Georgiades, Marshall, and Ollie Lord, and then obviously really Rioli being out at the time, it was very just a vanilla forward line. There just wasn't much flavour to it. There wasn't much points of difference to it. With Charlie Dixon coming back in the former years and obviously Asava being thrown down there and Willie being back in, there's a lot of things that have changed, but you just see just how much more dynamic they are and the opportunities for Mitch Georgiades are opening up as well. He was finding his own footy because that's how good he's come back. But yeah, you can just see he doesn't have to work. He's not, Mitch at times. I'm switching to Mitch, but it's because it's to give Charlie some plaudits. Mitch we've known for being a pack crasher, trying to take leaping marks. He hasn't done much of that in the last month,
no,
6 weeks of footy because he hasn't had to.
I was asking for it on Saturday night.
Yeah, it
like,
would have been
party time.
Would have been the cherry on top, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, it's just like he hasn't had to do as much of that stuff, which is good for protecting his body because the forward line's just so much more open and dynamic because of the work that Charlie Dixon's doing. So, had to get him in there as well because I'm loving his last 3 weeks of footy now are a really good little window into what if we can keep him fit, and he's changed his body composition a little bit to try to help in that effort if he's really going to be this player, as long as injuries aside, knock on wood. He's in some very, very good form. Some of the best it's a short window, but some of the best form I've seen him in since his All Australian year, really, just as to what he's offering the forward line as well as his own game.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to disagree with any of that assessment. Yeah. I'll gobble all of that up. Look, I had someone else listed, but I might change it on the fly and hope that you speak about them with your next one. But I'm just going to change tack and just go with Frankie Evans. And when I'm at the ground and I'm cheering on our team, I can't help but I can't help but put on a New Yorker accent and cheer on Frankie because I love it. And I like doing impressions because I'm a bit weird. Yeah, but to just focus on Frankie again, just kind of his, because Francis Evans is a role player, and that's okay. All good teams are made up of blue chip talent and role players. That's because you can't be a full 22 or 23 of blue chip talent. It doesn't work. It's been proven that it doesn't work. Any club that's tried to do that has ultimately not returned the rewards that they were hoping for. And Francis Evans is a role player, and that's fine. You've just got to be doing the things that a good role player does. And a lot of that's teamwork, and a lot of it's unrewarded running and creating space for other teammates and all of that. But I've been most impressed because obviously earlier in the season we've been big advocates for Jed McEntee, and we understand why the coaches want a Jed McEntee to work. And just on a side note, Jed McEntee is 21 and Francis Evans is actually 22 years old. So a bit similar to that Lockie Jones conversation, is probably a bit younger than what people understand or realize, and criticize them as if they were much more senior players. And maybe it's because Francis Evans is one of the eldest looking 22-year-olds in the AFL. I don't know, but
the fact he's come from another team too, like you automatically think they've got a few years of experience if they've come from another team, I think, even if they've only been there for a year or two. So, yeah.
Yeah, true. And so I just think I think his work rate has lifted, particularly when he doesn't have the ball. He's obviously shown in patches since he's been brought over to our club that he's capable of kicking, multiple goals on any given day, but it's some of the work off the ball that I think was his biggest area for improvement. And I've been impressed because I've been critical of that in the past when you maybe comparing him to other small forwards or pressure forwards, that he maybe has left a little bit to be desired in that regard. But I mean, you brought up his pressure acts last week, and then his pressure acts, I think, and it's funny, in a demolition like it was on Saturday, pressure acts are a bit lower because we've got a lot more of the ball. And as well as that is, I actually think that I'm not sure if tackles, they would have to be included, but we're actually, I think it all comes down to the fact that we had a lot more of the ball on the day. So, but he still ended up, top 8 for our side in terms of pressure acts. So just fulfilling that small forward role as a role player. He's not the man, and 300 meters gained as well, which shows that he's working back to then take the ball forward. Just after watching the replay as well, obviously knew he was having a decent night in regards to his role on Saturday, but just appreciated it a bit more in reflection and after watching that gameplay again. So wanted to put him up there.
No, that was a good one. He was another one on my short list. You need to go with that Frankie accent. Whenever you say Frankie from now on in this podcast, it is a rule that you have to say it in that accent now. So
Frankie. It's good.
No, I'm into it because I'm weird and like impressions as well. Just terrible at that. I'm just terrible at them myself. So the one I'm going to go with, would be interesting if it's the one that you were almost going to go with, but I had to go with as I mentioned, called him earlier, the sixth musketeer of our midfield in Jackson Mead. I just thought,
yes, that wasn't who I was going to pick, but
who are you going to pick now?
Jordan Sweet.
But
we've kind of already touched on him, so it might have influenced my change there. I'm here for the Jackson Mead love for sure.
I just love that in a performance that we had. Obviously, the 5 midfield stars kind of led us in disposals, but Mead wasn't too far away. With he had 19, he had 6 marks. He went at, I think, 78%, roughly 78.9%. efficiency, 6 score involvements, just like a real good round. Like considering the amount of ball that a lot of our stars had, he still found a way, and he had some good, just some good. Like I can't pick out any moments. So I didn't write anything down too closely on him because he was down my list, and I didn't expect to get to him, but. He just pops up. Like he's one of those players you notice. He's growing in confidence. Again, we've talked about him a bit at times in the last probably 8 weeks. I think he's popped up and possibly in the watch list. Not watch list, the spotlight already. But yeah, I just want to, being that we're going to probably talk about some of the midfield stars going in when we get to votes and whatnot. Really just wanted to give him his plaudits that he's playing such a great role as that, that change. He kind of reminds me of, again, we're doing a lot of 2004 content at the moment. Just guys like Schofield coming off the bench, those kind of guys that change midfielder that you could have that could come in and just play a role that it's that far exceeds kind of what a lot of other teams can do in that change midfielder off the bench kind of thing. And yeah, I think he's low key going to be quite important going forward this year. Obviously, going forward into future years, really hope he's got a lot of importance there. But I think this year he's actually low key just really important to have. His pressure. I think he was up there in pressure act as well. If I'm just going back through down my list, I think he was 5th best for us in
13.
pressure acts.
Yeah, equal 5th best.
Yeah, with Ollie. Yeah, which is pretty good company to be keeping. And your guys, Jordan Sweet, you mentioned, was up there on 14 as well. So, yeah, a lot of, obviously it wasn't a game. It was, because last week we talked about the pressure acts against Carlton. We had guys with 30 odd and whatnot. So it's just the game it was. We didn't need as much pressure to beat Sydney. But, I'm just loving watching Jackson. I mean, there's a little bit of bias because you're watching the son of a bloke that I grew up watching. And, yeah, so... You want to see him do well. It's kind of, we have a similar thing with Jace Burgoyne as well, who I think had a decent game as well. But everyone had a decent game. What am I saying, David? But yeah, good spotlights. It's fun to just be fucking positive. Let's do it.
Well, and games are decided by some of, like we're talking about role players. Like games are more often than not decided by your bottom 6 players or your pack of role players in the end. And like they're all contributing, which is all you ask for.
Yep, exactly. Alrighty, we'll get into our segments, which is always fun after games like this, especially. It's actually quite tough to narrow it down sometimes. But just to touch on last week's winners quickly on the goal of the week, we had a Rioli snap and then the Darcy Byrne-Jones roving between 3 Carlton defenders and scoring with a kind of dribbler snap. And the Darcy Byrne-Jones won, which I think was my pick.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and I went second on that one, so I feel pretty good about that. That was 12. There was a little about 60% of the vote on that one, and I think I took a real low hanging fruit on.
Well, they were both going to be my pick anyway, so I'm not mad at all.
The Sweeney, I got the Bergman tackle, the double tackle on Cripps and Ollie Hollands last week, won the Sweeney quite convincingly. So, which was I think was going to be a pretty obvious one. So, so that's last week's winners, which is a couple of good ones there to go into the end of the year. Bin for all of the, or not bin the competition for the moment for the year. Which is going to be lots of fun to choose from. It's going to be fun to actually go back through and remember all of them when I have to put them together.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Alrighty, goal of the week, which I get to go first. Jesus, just low-hanging fruit for me again, but the Dixon snap, where it's the 100 up at Adelaide Oval, there was some good commentary around it.
3/4 number from Houston. Wasn't a bad idea. Georgiades flicks it to Dixon. Charlie on the left. The right, the left. Doesn't matter. 100 up at the Adelaide Oval.
Kicking goals and heading into the centre square to take the ruck. He's on fire, big Charlie. Kick 4 on Noah Boulder a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. great commentary around it. It was the standing snap. It was I think it was Derm just talking about the form of the snap, just like he's a big man, and he's just like he's playing. He's just
complete control,
complete control, and then obviously that's the one that he end up he kicks the goal, celebrates, and then runs to the centre bounce to take the next bounce. Which often you see guys kick a goal like that, they run off to the boundary, but he's a bigger forward, so. But yeah, I love that goal. It was just like the vibes are good. There is a little bit of the moment about it too. It's the 100 up at Adelaide Oval. There's a lot of cricket analogies with the
the Oval.
The 71 for one kind of like stuff when we were 71 points to one up, and but yeah, the Dixon snap and yeah, just a beautiful goal and well executed. And he was just in ripping form, as we've talked about already. But yeah, I love that goal. I loved everything about it. The aesthetic of it. It was a real clean form in how he planted his foot and snapped around the body and knew exactly where he was going for the goal. And yeah, the commentary that went with it and everything that was happening at the time just perfectly set the vibes for me. A lot of good goals for the day, but that was I just had to pick that one just because there's a lot of vibes about the moment that really worked for me.
Yeah, great nomination, and yeah, definitely on my short list. Loved it from Charlie, and on the left too. Just he surprises sometimes with his use of his left foot, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
An honourable mention to Dan Houston's long bomb from 50 from Dantown, as Hutto coined it on commentary. Awesome piece of play. Really, leaves you scratching your head. In a football sense of how oppositions can still leave Kane Farrell and Dan Houston free to do that kind of stuff. But I'm going to go with Boki's goal in the fourth quarter.
Georgiades, Dixon, HORNE-FRANCIS, got it, gave it, Boke from the pocket! When Boki's kicking goals like that, you know it's some sort of night.
Look, he was out of their side about 5 or 8 years ago, and he's just worked his way back in and playing his role and
careering towards the pocket, the boundary, and just whacking it on the boot, and maybe just epitomised the whole night with that kick. Because as we know, and as I tweeted at the time, Boki doesn't do that, not this year. And the fact that it went through, it just summed up the whole evening, and the crowd were into it. I was definitely into it. Boki loved it. Again, being very self-aware, he would be known like, fuck. I'm rarely getting that away this year, but hey, it's party time. And awesome goal. Goal.
Really nice. Low-key, really nice little like gather and dish handball from HORNE-FRANCIS with the assist on that one as well, which just another part of his great game.
Absolutely.
Which we'll get, I'm sure it'll come up in a little while, but really nice goal. That was the second on my list as well. So it was
nice.
And Houston's was in consideration for me as well. So it was
just sorry to cut you off, but just due to the nature of the game, like there was some fairly simple goals as well. Like there's a lot of fairly ultimately simple goals, like a few set shots that we did actually kick, and there was a nice healthy bunch of entertainment as well.
Yeah, love the the other honorable mention I had in my list was the Mitch Georgiades one, where I think it's I think I can't remember who snapped it in, but I think this one was the one that Darcy Byrne-Jones dribbled it into the to the top of the square, and Sydney take possession of it, and then Esava with some good forward pressure tackles it. It spills out and just spills out to Georgiades, who just snaps through.
They basically handballed it to Georgiades. Is that the one that you're talking about?
Yes, yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So it's like a relatively simple finish, but it's just like it was just fun. It was just good vibes, and really loved Esava's for like tackling pressure and kind of that. Obviously, he's a defender that's playing down forward, although he was a forward that got turned into a defender. So who knows at this point? But some good goals. Certainly. As you said, there was a lot of relatively simple ones just because of our dominance, but we still got some fun ones there, which particularly in the second half, it really turned into party time. So it'd be fun to see I think it's two very similar goals in vibes. I think it might just come. It would be interesting if it comes down to just pure favoritism. It would be interesting to see how this one
Yeah,
goes. I think this one
probably.
could be a close vote on that one. So we watch this space. Alrighty, the Sweeney, and you get to go first. There's a few good ones this week as well, for sure.
All right, Sweeney. Yeah, I just realized that I just written a whole list of great moments and then I never actually landed on a choice. So, again, doing it a bit on the fly, but actually, I think coming into today, we spoke about it earlier, but I think I did just want to land on Jordan Sweet's inboard kick that you mentioned earlier.
Jordan Sweet waiting on the outside. Kicked a goal already tonight as he bounds forward.
That's a good kick.
Well, Rioli for a moment thought he was going to be able to take the mark, and then he realised it was following Frankie Evans.
That's a stunning kick.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at this. So you've got HORNE-FRANCIS in there, and see Rowbottom just hedges his bet, stays close enough, and you see it was Fox came out to the forward flank as well, and that creates space.
Again, being a ruckman and being so tall and bulky and stereotypically, ruckmen don't do those sorts of things, as we and Hutto mentioned earlier. But yeah, it was just so sweet, pun intended, that it was a fantastic kick inboard that maybe we can come to expect from Sweet, because he is fairly mobile and he is fairly well skilled for a big man. So yeah, I'm going to go with that one. Sweet's inboard kick inside 50.
Yeah, I love that one. That's I actually didn't have that on my shortlist, although I should have, because I think I remember it on the night, but I think it was like 4:30 in the morning by the time that was happening. I really picked up on it in the replay today, but I didn't have it down on my list. But yeah, that's a really, really good one. It's great for the pun for like, 'cause sometimes when I'm titling the things for the video and putting it out on the socials, sometimes it's really hard to find, because you have to find for the poll, you have to fit it within 15 or 20 characters. So you have to try to.
All right. Yeah.
But just like anything like Jordan Sweet related, you just go Jordan's sweet goal or Jordan's sweet kick. So that's a good one to pick, because that one works for me in my social stuff. So appreciate that, Jamie. That's a good pick as well. I'm going to go with mine again. Some low hanging fruit, I think. But the Air Sava mark early in the third quarter, I thought was just, and he is the one. It's the one mark he took that he kicked the goal from as well, which is really nice that he finished it off with a goal.
Back into the corridor to Logan Evans, and then Rosie with a bit of a run up, angles the kick off the outside of the boot. Radaglia!
Too powerful. Ollie Florent was the only one who could run back. He tried to put a little bit of an unsettling body bump against Bigger Sava.
He might be a better forward than a back.
He definitely is, Roo. He's just not a good goal kicker.
He's played the majority of his career as a forward. It's really only been the last couple of years.
But a really good mark that again speaks to some of what we were talking about earlier. Just some of the bodies that we have in the forward line at the moment that are athletic. And yeah, Asava's, obviously I just spoke about it when I was giving an honourable mention to a goal before, that some of the forward pressure he can do with his defensive, the defensive skills he has from his time, and just being a good forward pressure defender in that way. But yeah, just the fact that when it comes to the ball coming inboard into the forward 50, he's constantly present. And that was really nice. I mean, he took some great marks in the night, just in a more standard fashion, but the fact that he was able to kind of fly and, have a little bit of a sit, and take a great
I wrote
mark.
it down. Yeah, exactly like you said at Air Sava. In my short list as well.
Yeah. He is one of the 3 Mark of the Week nominations this week as well. So,
he is? Yeah, I was wondering if they would give him the nomination.
Yeah, it's him. Zane Dersmer, obviously. I can't remember the third one. But yeah.
Tough to beat that Dersmer one. But Port supporters, you know what to do.
Yeah, I voted, and it's funny because I actually tweeted, I rarely put too much out about opposition teams, but I was just like, it's family member of a former player, so I put a tweet out about Dersmer's mark when I was watching the game earlier, and then a few hours later, I'm just like, well, I'm going to be voting for another one if that one pops up, and it did. So yeah. So I voted for Asava as well. So sorry to the Dersmer family, but Port for life. But yeah, it was a great moment, good vibes. Obviously kicking the goal after really topped it off. So yeah, it'll be interesting. It's good. Two very different kind of Sweeneys, because been really appreciative of the Creed fam out there that have taken, because sometimes earlier in the year when we're doing Sweeney nominations, sort of like I was wondering, kind of trying to gauge what the votes have been really mixed on some of the ones that are very different.
Yeah.
And it just shows there's some good appreciation for different moments out there. And again, we love the interactions for the Sweeney, which, yeah, to remind you, it's a play on the Sydney Sweeney meme from the Hot Ones YouTube series, where she's just looking very lovingly about some chicken wings and good vibes and warm and fuzzies, which is what the Sweeney is all about. So that's two moments this week that gave us those feels, which just the whole game. The whole game was a Sweeney. Let's just nominate the whole game.
Was a Sweeney. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, God. All right. Player of the Year votes. This was actually the toughest part of this whole fucking preparation for this episode. I spent far too much time on it. A good problem to have in this instance. It's not like, if we flip back to Brisbane it was trying to find 5 players to fill the votes. Whereas this week, this week it's like we want to nominate all 22. But I found a way to do it. I'm not exactly sure. I feel great. Actually, no, I feel great about it. It's just like there's so many players that could have got in there. Honorable mention I can't believe he missed, because I just don't know how. Connor Rosie somehow didn't find. He was in there a few times and then he dropped out, and he's not in there. Dan Houston as well was in there and then dropped out. Should be in there, but it's just, again, we're doing 1 through 5. Players have got to miss. It's a hard process, and again, after games like this, we try to, I try to fit different guys in there. But it was a very midfield dominant game, so it's a lot of midfielders in there. But yeah, there's still some guys that have to miss, and Rosie was one of them, because I think Rosie's start to the game was incredible, and obviously missed a couple of goals.
He set the groundwork.
And I feel bad for him missing, but it's just how the cookie crumbled. So my one vote goes to, I got Zach Butters in there, which again, Butters had an incredible game as well. He's getting back to some of that Butters form we love, but he's, again, one vote feels almost mean, but that's where he fell. 30 touches at 70%, just an incredible game. In that note, 11 score involvements, 8 tackles, 5 marks, 7 inside 50s, up there in the pressure acts as well with 19. Just, again, I'm reading it out. I'm like, how the fuck have I got him at the 1 spot? So, yeah, it's just what a game it was to have that he is there with 30 touches and he's just in the 1 spot. But that's just
that was me after the Richmond game when we were doing our votes. I'm like reading it out. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, it's just like, fuck this up. But no,
it's all understandable. It's all understandable.
Yeah. In my 2 spot, I've got Mitch Georgiades. Again, he's just present. Beyond, so he got the 4 goals, the 8 marks, his movement and everything, the 11 score involvements, which obviously, as being the forward and playing the way he does, is going to be, obviously a lot of score involvements. But I loved, there was one moment in the game where it's just like Sydney are trying to get out the back of our forward line, and they kick inboard to the corridor, which is something they like to do as well. And Mitch Georgiades is just like stuck out a mitt and taking a mark and turns around. And,
I didn't write that down, but I was like, that's a semi Sweeney for me. Right?
Oh yeah, it was in my short list for me. Yeah, because it's just like Sydney going forward, and suddenly it's just like he's just kind of floated forward.
Mind.
Yeah. It's just. Yeah, so obviously the 4 goals, again, was an incredible result. I think if he'd kicked maybe 1 or 2 more, like the 2 shots that he missed that were probably very gettable for him, he would have got up to the 3 spot. But it's such a tough week this week with just so many good performances. But yeah, had to get Mitch in there again. Just he's continuing to be one of the premier forwards in the competition, which is deserving of votes when you have a game like that against the best team in the competition, as they are with ladder position at the moment, whether or not you feel that with their form. My 3 votes, Ollie Wines. Again, vintage Wines, 31 touches at 80%, which I think is really, Ollie Wines often had it. Again, I think it's a thing we've talked about a bit this year is his historic reputation as a bit of a ball burner is gone away a little bit this year. He's a lot cleaner with the ball than his reputation that may precede. 8 clearances, 18 contested, so just a beast. 9 score involvements, and just the perfect finish to the game with that nice set shot that shaped in beautifully from the pocket there
it really
after the
did.
siren to get the 112-point win and really just the cherry on top of the game. And you just know when Ollie Wines is sinking a set shot like that at the end of the game, it's just like, that's just the game. The day has gone perfectly. So,
When
yeah.
again, just sorry to cut in though, just
Oh, yeah.
another thing to celebrate too, because that goal was his 100th career goal too. So
That's right,
like,
yeah.
it's just like, I think there was someone else who crossed the 100 mark earlier in the game, and
Georgiades, I'm pretty sure, hit
it might have
100.
been it might have been Georgiades
It
actually.
was because
Although
I started trying to extrapolate. I was just like, Georgiades has played 62 games, he's got 100 goals. So I was like, if he plays 248, he's going to be at 400 if he goes at this pace. But if he should get better anyway. That's what my brain was doing for about 10 minutes on on the weekend.
Yeah, but it was just
Um,
like, if we didn't have enough to celebrate already, like the ground staff, to their credit, they had it ready to go, and like everyone's cheering the win. And then it's like, oh, 100 goals, yeah, again. That was just another great point. Sorry to cut in there, but
No, I'm glad you brought that up because I'd seen that on the socials, but I'd neglected to put it into my notes. But it did remind me as well. Just go back to Georgiades for a second, that he also did kick his 100th goal, which, again, my chaotic brain spent 10 minutes trying to figure out what kind of career mark he can get to based on where he's at, and trying to extrapolate out that he's going to improve, hopefully, all going well. So, but yeah, he's on pace for 400 goals in 240 games at this rate. So, not a bad return, and he should improve on that,
Good.
I would think. Anyway, back to the votes at hand. My 4 votes: Jason Horne-Francis. It was some great commentary from the guys on the weekend. I think it was Rashudo, which is always surprising to hear such glowing stuff from him. But to be objective, he can have his good moments. He just has his bad ones as well. But he kind of, I think it was Rue, it could have been Derm, I can't remember which one, but one of them just said, whenever he gets the ball, it just feels like his disposals are so much. They're kind of, I can't remember exactly how they phrased it, so I'm paraphrasing, but they're just saying his disposals are always just feel like he gets a result out of so many disposals. Like like they're all worth 1.5 disposals, so to speak, or whatever metric that we've used at
like
times.
he's always going to try and do something with it, so it makes the opposition have to defend him. Because if you don't, he'll embarrass you, so to speak. Again, to paraphrase what they were saying.
Yeah, I've just had a memory back to Derm again. Just Derm just having a night. He started talking about fighter jets, and he's just like, it's like a Messerschmitt and a Spitfire or something like that.
Yeah, I know. I was like, that's a bit of historical military knowledge there.
I appreciate it. I was just like, yeah, let's go. I'm like,
about his turning circle.
Yeah, I graduated with a degree in history, so I was like, fuck yeah, let's get some fucking World War II planes in here. Let's go. But yeah, he just turns on a dime, and he's like a fighter jet. Like like I thought he was going to start going Top Gun, like with the Top Gun Maverick, with that the Generation 5 fighters or whatever the fuck they were talking about in that movie. But love that movie. But yeah, then he started talking about Messerschmitts and stuff. I was just like, fuck yeah, but it was a great analogy for what Horne-Francis, because he had a couple of those moments where he broke away from a couple of Sydney players and really just turned on a dime and was able to hit one on the outside of the boot and get it inside 50. Which he had 27 disposals for the game, 15 contest. Like he was just the contested beast for this game was just the 3, and get to the last one in a moment. But yeah, he had 5 inside 50, 6 clearances, 12 score involvements. He had his 1 goal, which at the start of the game, I think you do heighten that moment. Like it was a tough shot. He's around the corner. Kicks are pretty good.
Left.
Yeah. It was on the left too. Yeah. A really good goal, and that was a second goal of the game. So again, still when the game is there, we've got to start taking our opportunities to build and what we got to. That was part of that platform, and he had 3 goal assists as well, and just which I think led the team. He was just there's a good spread of goal assists and goals throughout the game, but which just shows the team effort. But just one of those Jason Horne-Francis games that just makes you so salivate to what he can become, because he's already just, when he's second best in my votes for a game that we just did that to the ladder leaders. It's really, and beating some pretty damn good players to get up my list. It's a really good result. No question that, no surprise that my player of the game, and my 5 votes for the Player of the Year award goes to Willem Drew, who's had an incredible couple of weeks against, last week against the second team on the ladder and this week against the first team on the ladder. 32 disposals led the team, 16 contested, 6 tackles, 8 clearances, 8 inside 50s, 11 score involvements. This is the stuff like later on as I'm reading is where you start getting like, this is the stuff that you were talking about last week as well. And we were talking about just lauding his 100th game and some of the underrated parts of his game, that he reads the game well and a lot more involved in the offensive side than some people give him credit for. And this game kind of showed that. Like he had he brought that ball inboard for Mitch Georgiades to take that kind of half contested mark at the top of the goal square.
The one-hander,
Yeah. Kind of just fell into his Easter basket kind of thing, but
yeah. Good cross from Drew there.
Yeah, it was a real nice like just cross from Trent and Alexander-Arnold into the box, wasn't it? Yeah. But yeah, just his stats across the game. He led the team for meters gained with 523. It was a good spread of a lot of players that were getting the ball forward. Again, just speaks to the overall team effort. But and again led the team in pressure acts with 23. Just a great Willem game, which shout out to you for wearing the shirt, the WD28 shirt. It got a real nice baptism at the game. Like you couldn't have asked for better on that. But yeah, Willem Drew
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's funny.
Absolutely was very happy that I was adorned by WD28 shirt. Still available at the Creed store for all those playing at home.
Yeah, I will be expanding stuff from there soon, but yeah, that'll stay. I think that's got to stay, especially as it's been worn and worn well in its first appearance at Adelaide Oval. But yeah, Willem, we mentioned a few weeks ago that he hadn't made it into the votes for a while, even though he'd been playing reasonably well. But yeah, he's certainly stormed back into the votes with some really, really good performances in the last couple of weeks. So that's my votes. I'm really interested to see where yours go because, like I said, I had a tough time. There's no wrong answers. It's very tough to narrow it down.
Yes, this is a safe space. All right. Well, yeah, we'll start at one. Bit of a nepotism alert, but I've actually given my 1 vote to Charlie.
I was trying, but I was like, I can't have 2 forwards in mine. But you can.
Yes, you've got players like Willie kicking 4. George kicked 4, although that was heavily weighted to the first half. I think Dixon's game overall was very even across the 3 or 4 quarters. And he was contributing in multiple facets of the ground. But as well as that, you alluded to it before, like his handballing to players to eventually just break away from a contest. But getting them on the half volley on the ground and disposing of them at pace, again, it was a little bit of a reverting back to some of his better groundwork of the past. And yeah, it has eluded him largely in recent times, but whatever. Again, another shout out to my old man. He turned to me and he's like, "That suspension's actually helped, Charlie." Like, and yeah, in a funny way, as frustrated as we were as Port supporters when he did get suspended, thus far, it does seem like it's been a blessing in disguise because he's got the challenge from Ken of whether he wants to fight for his spot. He's dropped the weight. He's got himself fit again, and seemingly is reaping the benefits of that again thus far. We've still got a little bit to play out, but yeah, it was just astounding. Some of the half volleys he was taking off the ground and just quickly dishing them off. Like you said, two goal assists, was it? Yeah, and then 3 goals. So he's had 5 goal involvements for all intents and purposes, and the hit outs to advantage, in comparison to how many hit-outs he'd won, that's a good return. In my opinion, we've obviously been focusing a lot on hit-outs to advantage rather than just pure hit-outs. So, yeah, it was just the even contribution across the whole game in his number 1 role, but also his number 2 role and some of those little aspects around that and teamwork around that too. So, there we go, justifying my nepotism. He finished with, I forgot to reel off his stats, but 14 disposals, 8 of which were contested, and he went at 100% disposal efficiency, so can't argue with that.
Mhm.
3 goals, the 2 goal assists, and then, which was all within 10 score involvements overall, which was second best on ground. He got 1 clearance for Lols, 8 marks in total, 2 of which were contested, 1 which was an intercept, and 3 1%ers. So, just bits and pieces of everything, but some key highlights there as well within his statistics. My number 2 goes to Butters.
Yeah.
I think it was, again, friend of the pod, Timmy Nash. I think it was him, and apologies if it was someone else and they're listening, but basically did like the 3-2-1 in terms of our lines on the ground. And it was midfield 3 votes, forwards 2, and defense 1. And in brackets, it was something along the lines of sorry, but it didn't really go down there enough to push you up. And that's essentially kind of where my votes landed. I've got 4 midfielders because it really was one in the midfield. Like, we just absolutely fucking dominated them, and which is really interesting and kind of funny because it was the AFL social media page and AFL website who put up the midfield.
Oh, it was
Sydney Imports midfield. It's like
it's like the 5v5
midfield, or who's going to win. Like, ultimately it was a non-contest. We smashed them. So Butters, for all the reasons that you said, really, again, he's been contributing, but also he's been battling a bit of a tag, and he didn't really cop a lot of attention. I know Rowbottom's done a lot of jobs this year and in previous, but I think it was his return game.
It was his return game.
Yeah, and I don't think he put anywhere near as much attention as maybe they had the time again that they would have. And you just know, like, and Butters is probably cottoned onto the fact that he's not copping a heavy tag, and just lets him roam free and do his little dinky kicks. And
that's a real nice ground ball gathers. I forgot to mention before.
Yeah.
There was that really nice one. It was just a clean gather and just dashed off. Just beautiful stuff.
Yeah. And another aspect of the game and like how we should attack it after we've got the jump on them was whether they have a taste for blood or they smell blood in the water. And a shout out to a friend of the pod, Stu. Again, it was a comment that he made to me and about Butters and then JHF as well, about they're the type of players who would kind of smell blood in the water and really use it to fuel their games, because they're those type of players. And though that attack on those ground balls that you just mentioned, things like that, like when he's on a tear and he's got room to move, or he's not being held back by a tagger, like that's a pleasure to watch. 3 votes goes to Ollie Wines. Fantastic Ollie Wines game. And again, we spoke about him in a bit of depth last week as well. He's just really coming into his own at the right time of the year. And you mentioned his disposal efficiency. I think with the benefit of having so many smooth movers with the football, all he needs to do is just get it to them, really.
Yeah.
A
lot of handballs,
and do the work.
I'm trying to go down to SEC. What is handball number?
14 kicks. So
14 kicks, 17 handballs. So whereas if you look at the rest of the 5 midfielders, they're very dominated. It's very kick dominated. So but that's not like, you've still got to be clean with your hands. So it's like no slouch on him. It's just like, it's good that we're able to maximize his best attributes within the system that we're playing now, and I'm sure he's loving playing that role too.
Because he can absorb an attempted tackle from an opposition player and just go, cool, and then hand it off. Someone in space, and he's maybe even drawn 2 people in while doing that kind of thing.
He's just like, watch these pipes go to work.
I'm massive. 4 votes goes to HORNE-FRANCIS, along the lines of what you said. Just impact on the game, his attack, or his thirst for the contest, and just that ability to scare opponents through sheer willingness to do something with the football, as we chatted about before.
Mm.
It's the fantastic game, and yeah, he hasn't had a great game since round 11, according to some professionals in the media. No, that was a comment last week, though, to be
Yeah.
fair. Or the week before, I can't remember. But yeah, he's having a fantastic season for the amount of experience that he has, and
Oh yeah.
he's just running with it.
Said he's
That's
second.
awesome.
He's second in our Player of the Year at the moment.
Yeah,
And yeah, he's going to gain a little bit of ground on Butters now that I'm looking at it. But yeah, still Butters has
yeah,
got a decent lead out in front. But yeah, for the age he is, he's
yeah. And I think we
that's-
would all say that he's performing at a higher level than what we could have expected and maybe hoped for. Probably hope for this though, but realistically, probably expecting him to just be a bit below where he has in fact been performing. And
yeah,
in saying that, to be performing at the level that he is across the whole season is, yeah, fantastic. And it just changes our makeup when he's in that vein of form. So credit to him. Yeah, obviously my 5 votes go to WD28. Handy for any sticky situation.
yeah.
Yeah, Willem Drew.
Not that a midfield was at all rusty on the weekend, but yeah,
No, and
he's
he
still
fronted the midfield. So,
yeah.
Excuse me. Tim Jennifer, again, to just quote, because really you got to turn to the Adelaide kind of media to get any Port Adelaide content after the weekend. But Tim Jennifer said something funny, and there's a friend of his that sent him a text message saying, like, well, if we're not careful, Willem Drew's going to cop a tag soon because he's just playing so well now. And that was actually pretty funny.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, and I think he even got credited for doing, like, for negating the likes of Chad Warner on the
I think
night.
because Chad Warner only had 19 touches, so yeah, there was some talk about that. Willem was playing a bit of a role in him, but I guess just with whether Sydney just weren't up to the task, so he could play a role in him, but still got plenty of his own. But yeah, that does speak to what you were saying last week as well, just how good of a two-way. I think I said it last week, like a two-way tagger.
Yeah.
You need to be a two-way tag. Like if you're going to be a true tagger, you need to be a two-way tagger, as you brought up Kane Corns and what he could do both ways. And he did that on the weekend.
He
apparently
epitomized it on the weekend. Yeah, you mentioned his pressure acts. I think he was the only Port. Yeah, he is the only Port player in 20s. And again, when your team has got a lot of the football, can't really put on pressure when you're holding it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's just still noteworthy that he's our leading disposal getter, but also leading us for pressure acts and potentially he's second for contested possessions. So it's just an all-round game. And I mentioned to someone on Twitter, apologies again if you're listening, because it was obviously posted a selfie for those not on Twitter or those that don't follow me of myself in the WD28 shirt pre-game, and then someone commented on it afterwards just saying, just mentioning how good of a game he had. And I made the point of saying, well, all of a sudden, now we have 5 A graders. Actually, I kind of mentioned it in the preview last week. Like you could argue that Willem Drew is an A grader if you're looking at certain aspects of the game and what his role is. But I guess games like the one that he played on the weekend and drawing back to the Carlton game, you could absolutely say that we have 5 A grade midfielders now. And funnily enough, when in our worst patch of form this season, some of the comments around our team and in particular the midfield was to say we've got too many midfielders and that's why Rosie and HORNE-FRANCIS need to spend more time forward. You look at this patch of form now, and sure, we have been rotating HORNE-FRANCIS and Rosie and Butters and the like forward, and Mead spends his time forward as well. We've clearly got the perfect amount of midfielders because
it's all about the mix.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, these are coming from people who are paid to analyze the game. And sure, vitriol and negativity and criticism, that's what gets you the traction in media, but yeah, you pay to do a job. Like, just be pragmatic about some of your assessments. Like, yeah, we came up against Carlton, who had two A-grade midfielders, and we beat them because we had more A-graders than them, who are committed to the task.
Yeah.
Because then we come up against Sydney, who you could argue have 4 A-graders, albeit young like ours. And and again, we killed them and we blanketed them because all of our top level midfielders, along with our role players, were all up for the fight and stuck to the task at hand. And yeah, it's such a pleasure to watch now. And going into a game, you're like, well, which one's going to be the highlight? And you mentioned Rosie didn't even make it into the votes, although we both believe he had a great game and set a lot of the groundwork early and was still doing those fantastic Connor things, just zipping in and out of traffic. And I think still up there, 3rd for tackles, Rosie, like against doing some of those defensive things that
he took 8 marks and 27 touches and
18 pressure acts, which again was 3rd for the team. So yeah, like building.
If you're a fantasy player, he's equal 2nd in fantasy. It depends if it's super coach or fantasy. I fucking don't. Anyway, that's not worth touching on really, but he was up there anyway.
Yeah. The point being is that if you want to go for you want to make a vitriolic statement to come around to some sort of weird point that you want to make, professionals in the media, this is, and say we've got too many midfielders. Yeah, games like this epitomize the fact that if you've got a litany of guns, that you're gonna hurt oppositions, and it's a lot of work for them to do.
Yeah,
we're reaping the benefits right now. You would say that it looks like we're building and starting to peak at the right time of the year, and all of these guys are the reason for that.
Yeah,
more or less.
I think saw one of the shows mention that Rosie, Butters, and HORNE-FRANCIS all spent at least like 20% of time up forward, and those three only attended one centre bounce together as like the 3.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it was either 360 or on the couch, but it was just like that. Just shows that because a lot of people that from the outside that just don't watch what we're doing too much just go, oh, those are the 3, and so they'd probably be shocked to hear those stats, but they don't realize that we're still, Ollie Wines, who only won a Brownlow 3 years ago, is still there and playing pretty good footy again, and Willem Drew, and then Jackson Mead and Vop it in there, and so the midfield mix is just really working well. That's what we were asking for, 8 weeks ago when we weren't playing as well. We knew we had the horse, like the horses in the stable. It's just how to use them and figure it out. So. Incredible. Yeah, it's interesting that at the end of the day, that after all the toughness with figuring out the votes, we did come to the same top 3. So
Well, and we both had Butters in, albeit in different spots. So
we just picked a forward each basically.
Don't think I gave an honourable mention. Don't think I gave an honourable mention, but I think Kane Farrell was really unlucky to miss as well. Dan Houston, I think, was one of our better AFL player rated players on the night, but I thought Kane Farrell's overall game, it had a bit more depth than other games, and some of the defensive integrity that he showed on top of his one wood that we usually see. I thought he actually had a fantastic game.
I really enjoyed his game as well.
Unlucky to miss, but I kind of just, again, Timmy Nash's status is that post on Twitter was kind of what rationalized it all in my mind. So plaudits to him.
Absolutely. I said there could have been, he could have made a case for a lot of players, like right down through to the 10th to 12th player on the list. You could probably find a case for if you wanted to. Maybe not that far, but it was a really good game. And hopefully it continues through to this weekend. It's I think kind of what we touched on, what you said in particular. I mean, we said it when we went into the Carlton game, that winning this one will change the perceptions. Because Carlton was, before we played Carlton, it was we may not win another game, is what some pundits were saying.
Yeah.
And so we're at the now that we've won this one. You said it last week as we were previewing Sydney, that we win this one, it really sets up a platform. And once again, we're 2-0 into these last 5 games that were unwinnable by some pundit standards. And now we go into round 22 in Melbourne against the Melbourne Demons, 7 o'clock Adelaide time, 7:30 p.m. local in Melbourne. On Saturday night, suddenly a Melbourne team that's actually basically out of contention. This is a team that when we played them, I think that we actually played one of our better games of the year. We just couldn't get it all together as far as the scoreboard, and we lost it. So, yeah, better
And
game.
so did they.
Yeah.
To be fair.
And at the time, everyone was talking about them as a premiership contender, which just shows how long the season is and how much can change.
And it's the funny thing, sorry to interject, it's the funny thing when people bring up the historical data on performing against top 8 sides and whatnot, is you're negating that aspect of when you played whatever the team is. And yeah, look, we believe that we should have won. A lot of people believe that we should have won, but we did play Melbourne at one of their higher points of the season. And now, for those people writing down those stats, they're not a top 8 team. So you lost to the 11th spot, but like some of those other details to that analysis conveniently get pushed to one side, and I understand why, but it is just an interesting note coming up against them for the second time. I'll let you get back to your point.
Yeah, no, you're right. The fortunes have changed dramatically since. Before we get into some of those fortunes, just touch on the weather, what we should be expecting. Hopefully not much rain around. There's a touch of maybe a mil or two on Friday, which is, obviously the day before the game, but just partly cloudy and really not much chance of rain with the max of 17 on Saturday. Obviously being a night game, it'll be getting down to the lower temperatures, but not meant to be exceptionally cold. So it's Melbourne, it's August. It's going to be winter weather, but it's decent winter weather considering what it could be. And as touching on those different fortunes, Melbourne, obviously some big news earlier in the year with, like I said, with Petrarca going out for the season with that, kind of horrific injury, which as I look at it on the injury list, it's ribs/lung/spleen 2025 return. So obviously not making light of that. It's just it's incredible that he actually he's okay after all that. But he's Petrarca, who's clearly one of their best, out for the year. And probably the big news out of like immediate from how they've been playing is Stephen May, who spent a bit of time out with some fractured ribs earlier in the year, re-injured those ribs just last Friday night against the Western Bulldogs. It's TBC at the moment. I haven't seen anything while I've been recording if there's actually been a update to that, but I was reading that. There's an
article on the Melbourne website to say that, he's sustained fractures. I still think it's fairly vague.
And this is the context of it too. If they were fighting for top 4 or whatever, maybe because he has been one of those players that they've jabbed up to get through, like the grand final in 2021. I think he had a hamstring strain or something. He had something going on.
From the preliminary.
And so he got jabbed up and got through that game. And he's a player, I think. I'm trying to think. It was one of the podcasts I was listening to was trying to figure out what the word was for sadomasochism, he enjoys playing with pain. And then the other guy on the I can't remember which podcast I was listening to, but the other guy was like, I don't think he enjoys it. He just does it a lot. But I think this is one of those ones. Melbourne with the loss to the Bulldogs basically puts them at they need to win all 3 games, and then I think they're actually out of contention anyway. They basically would have. I think they're out of contention.
On points, they're two games behind, but their percentage is akin to Essendon's percentage. So
which is essentially another game when you're at this point. So they'd be putting Stephen May on ice and looking towards 2025. Obviously, Petrarca, Christian Salem's out for a couple of weeks. I see Ben Brown's a test on my list that I've got here, but Kayla Windsor's out as well. So they're missing guys. Charlie Spargo's out as well. So they're missing a lot of some of those players that, they've still got a decent side on paper, but with where they're at, they're not in good form at all. Some key players like
Swans
Stephen.
playing with a chipped fib.
Yeah. Like, why?
As Dan Gorringe would say.
Dan the clown as he was this week. Jesus, that was good fun. Yeah, it's just
to it, yeah.
Yeah, he's if you watch, I don't know if you watch on YouTube, he's sitting there dressed as a clown, like he's got the makeup on and everything.
I can picture it right now, and I know, someone else listening to this podcast will enjoy that because he also consumes that content.
He's just sitting. The entire intro is just like, I'm a clown for supporting these frauds, and this is what I've become. He's just like, he's got the wig, and he even honks his horn at the nose. His nose horn. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, for those listening, if you like, a bit of comedy and light-hearted look on AFL broadly, Dan Does Footy. It's a good podcast to listen to.
Especially if you just want to enjoy like Carlton not going well right now. But yeah, back to Melbourne. Yeah, it's an interesting, because I don't want to underestimate them, but like you just sit there and go, where we were just at on the weekend was like football nirvana, and Melbourne are just at the point of like they're just fading away into fading away into the golf courses. Because that's, you can just see that the fight's gone out of the season. They haven't put up much of a fight. They've had a few close results. Like Clayton Oliver, like they've got good players and they can, can stumble their way to a competitive game, but it's just like there's not enough there. Obviously, May's just such a big part of that defensive structure. And
Tom McDonald was just letting his emotions get the better of him to the max on Friday night. Max Gawn, he's carrying it. I think they're playing him because they have no faith in any of their backup ruck positions.
It'd be interesting this week if they could you imagine, like, if he's carrying an injury and that, like, Western Bulldogs was like the last hurrah, like they win that game, they stay in contention. Be interesting if you got to selection this week and it's like Max Gawn, he's out. Like, managed.
Well, that's like Clayton Oliver. Like, his lack of preseason has been pretty well documented. It's seriously catching up with him now. So while I agree, they've still got some good players and some premiership players on the list, and how they lined up against the Bulldogs on Friday, but they're a shell of the team that we expect. Yeah,
and I just don't see any way that their team, the way it's constructed at the moment and the way it's playing, the vibes, like, again, they're just not in premiership contention. There's no, like, yes, you play for pride, but I just don't think there's much, like, it's not like this isn't a rivalry game or anything like that. I don't think there's much on the line for Melbourne to put themselves into a real battle and try to beat us. So this is actually one of those games. I think I actually looked at it a couple of weeks back and thought this is probably one of the more winnable ones of our last five. And then I look at it as beating Carlton and Sydney, and then I go, well, it's even more winnable now. It's we should be winning this one, and then we should be going into the showdown the week after. But that's for next week. But these next two are suddenly, as you said last week, the platform really opens up if we beat Sydney, and now you look to the next 2 weeks, we're looking at Melbourne specifically, and so these just are so winnable now based on their form. Yes, it can change very quickly. We've seen that with our own team the last few years. We've seen that in the AFL this year in particular. It's just, it can change week to week, but I just don't see where Melbourne are at and where we're at, how that shift can happen that dramatically, that Melbourne could be. It could be one of those scrappy games that just, we're coming off a high, big win, which is another thing to watch, I think, going forward. It's like how we respond, because we've done this before. We've had big wins and then been a bit lackluster the next week. But this would be a real opportunity to show another side of ourselves, that we've gotten past that as well and go out and beat Melbourne comfortably. Even I'm not expecting 112 points. If we can go out and win by 40 or 50 points, I'd be fucking more than happy. I realistically think we should, 5-6 goals will be happy, but we should be aiming for a reasonably comfortable win again, based on just where we're at. We should, again, smell the blood, as we've said, and you said on this podcast regarding the Sydney game, smell the blood in the water and go for it, go for the kill. Melbourne, they're the wounded
There for the
whale.
kill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're the wounded whale that the Sharks are circling right now, and they're just
Yeah.
waiting to be killed off for 2024. Their season's done. They're cooked. They're just waiting to be
Yep.
fed. So that's what we should be looking at. And as far as our side goes, you've got to be looking at it going, we're just unchanged again, right? I don't think we had, I know Lear had, the only
No.
niggle on the weekend was Lear, and he came back fine after getting that, like, an ankle roll or something like that in that contest, but he came back on and finished out the game fine. So,
Yeah, Miles Bergman was on SEN last night,
Mhm.
and they had someone text about Aaliyah getting a scan done during the day, and Miles was just like, yeah, he hurt his ankle during the game, but we do a lot of precautionary scans throughout the year that you don't ever hear about. And he said,
Yeah.
like, even him, Miles Bergman, said, like, I've had 10 to 15 precautionary scans this year alone
Yeah.
that resulted in nothing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's the only question mark, but I expect Aaliyah to play, and yeah, I wouldn't be changing such a dominant winning side.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's been the question. I think it was funny. Ken Hingley joked in the press conference after the game, like, because they were talking about Asava, and he's like, well, he kicked one goal for, maybe he does need to go back again. But realistically,
Yeah, and
it's,
I'm scared. Like, there's still that, like,
oh,
what Ken is capable of, and like, as well as that, on the other side of the coin, also going, oh well, Todd Marshall will have to train, but he's in our best here and stuff, like things along those lines. And I'm like, no,
yeah.
don't do it. Like, you're just playing with us. In actual fact, I think just playing the game really of
Mm,
discussion.
yeah.
And it's another thing my old man said, just to bring him up. And yeah, he won't be listening. But yeah, he's like, where do you fit Todd Marshall? How do you bring him in? Because yeah, just emotions running high, and you can't, in my opinion. I think
I think
the
Todd,
balance that we found and the potency that we have across four lines now, and we know that he's been impeded this year, and that's why it seems kind of sick a little bit
yeah.
to keep putting an injured horse on the track. It's just like, just let him, like, sorry, Todd, your latest injury was really unfortunate and came at the hands of, Charlie Dixon, unfortunately, by accident.
Mm,
Really unfortunate, but get yourself right, have a great preseason, and just focus on next year.
yeah.
Unless we get an injury, or if they do want to rest Charlie for one more game this year, don't know why you would, because of his lengthy absence through that suspension, but that's the
Yeah.
only scenario that you would make an unforced change and bring Todd back in my opinion. Apart from that, you can't.
Yeah, yeah, no, I just don't. Yeah, I even went down the rabbit hole of watching some of the chatter about Rory Lobb. I was like thinking, just Todd Marshall's way back into the side could be if there's any defensive injuries, because his marking hasn't been as much of a pro. I mean, he's just all around been a bit down anyway, but it's just his kicking's been one of the main things. And
He wouldn't be a lockdown, like in that scenario, he wouldn't be a lockdown anyway.
No,
And I think it's
no,
been more about his contested work
yeah,
lacking, and has been part of the criticism on
mhm,
top of his yips that he has, whether
yeah.
related to body injury or not.
Yeah. So yeah, I just don't want him to. I just don't want to see, like, certainly with coming off some injury. I just don't. And it was a lot of talk was about getting, maybe you need some time in the sandful anyway. So it's just like, get him back into the sandful, get him back in shape, and get him confident again, and see where
But
that
they made
leads. But
Asava do just that.
yeah,
So, and
yeah,
yeah, Asava got injured, and yeah,
he had to go.
could have
Yeah,
easily been brought straight back in, but yeah, had
yeah.
to go through there. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
Asava's, I think he's earned his spot, despite you could say one goal for on the weekend, but he was present and available and made some really good efforts. So yeah, I can't fault anyone that's in the side at the moment. And after you've just had a win like that, it would be really rough to change. Yeah, what's your prediction for the game? Really, as we wrap up here, like I kind of put I put out about five different numbers. So, but yeah, I'm wondering where you're actually feeling with all of those kind of issues with Melbourne put into play there, and then where we're at? What are you feeling? Head and heart, are they the same, or where are we at?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, my head says 7 goals and my heart says 10 goals. So no,
That's,
but yeah, no, I actually just pulled that out of my ass really just then.
I thought that was
But
pretty good. I
yeah, I
was like,
mean, it was funny during the day on Saturday. I was chatting to a friend just about the context of the last month, and I said, just get ourselves over the line tonight, being the Sydney match. Because Melbourne are gettable in regards to a percentage boost, which we sorely need. Little did we know we would gain 7% on Saturday night, which leaves us with the tantalizing prospect of another percentage boosting win, which I expect. Like there is, like you said, Melbourne could make it a scrap because they've got a lot of decent players and a lot of premiership experienced players. But yeah, they're a sitting duck as far as I'm concerned. We blow them out of the water in the first quarter, and yeah, that's their season done. Like I was much more aware of Sydney's faults in regards to their first quarter, but not really sure where Melbourne's lie. Just looking back on their game on Friday night, that's exactly what the Bulldogs did. They blew them out of the water in the first quarter and just ran with it from that point on. So that's exactly what we need to do. It's on the MCG, which is another on top of where we're peaking. We get an opportunity to play on the G late in the season, and funnily enough, the teams in the finals, the way it kind of looks now, may not need to play on the G until the last game of the season. But it's the perfect time for us to play because I think. Just to draw back on a bit of match review and particularly the last 2 weeks, I think our defensive setup has been a lot better over the last 6 quarters in particular, and that last 2 games. Like the wall that we're setting up defensively, our forward press just seems a lot better structured. So the challenge that the MCG brings is it's a wider ground, so you have to spread your zone a little bit wider. So it's always good to get a run on there just to test your system in that regard, and more specifically test your defensive system because you have to plug holes. There's more space to fill. So
yeah,
perfect timing. Like all considered, like the confidence that we would have, like we've obviously got now, the form that everyone's in, the balance that our team has, the state that Melbourne is in, both on the ground and kind of off the ground, to be honest. Like we spoke about in our preseason shows about not really knowing where Melbourne sit in the grand scheme of things because seems to be a bit of turmoil around that club for whatever reason, whether true or not.
Clayton Oliver just can't escape trade rumors, even though the club keeps saying no, we'll fucking get rid of him. But yeah, it's just
I think I don't.
Which is the media, is the media as much as anything, but it is partly the turmoil at the club, like some of that uneasiness.
Easy target in that regard too. So with all of these things considered, like I expect to win handsomely. I would be disappointed if we don't. I expect to win. Look, I'll be happy if we bring home the 4 points because of all the heavy work that we did do for ourselves on Saturday night. But there would still be a part of me that's disappointed if we don't make this a big win as well. Because, the 2 games succeeding it could be a bit of a scrap as well. Yeah.
And the fact is, percentage could play a part here. We've actually got ourselves to a point that we're the top team. We're the top team of the 52-point teams at the moment. But there's like three of us, I think, there. So we want to maintain the percentage and increase it if at any chance is possible. Which again, it could be tough too, but we need to have that in mind as part of the puzzle of finishing out the season, heading into finals. Is percentage is going to play some part there. So there's a lot of you need the 4 points, but the percentage will play a part. It could be what's worth. It could be the difference between a double chance and not. So these are all the permutations that are in play.
Or a home, or a home qualifying.
home
final or not.
home qualifying final is in play for us. We've given ourselves that platform. It's tougher at home, but it is in play absolutely. So
but then just with the shifting nature of the ladder, like where last week was a bit of like there was a couple of 8-point games, but then there was a few where the better team did the job. But then, this weekend, I alluded to it earlier in this episode, is that we actually have an opportunity to either hold our spot or actually go to second, because Brisbane play GWS, who are second and fourth, right around us.
Yeah, so
Freo play Geelong. Like, there's all of the the machinations of the top 8 and hopefully top 4, which we now have in our sights, deservedly so. We just got to take care of business. And funnily enough, like you said, this 2 weeks ago, this was the game that we thought, well, if we hold up well against Carlton and Sydney, this is the one that we can really attack. And that's just emphasised now with how we have performed over the last 8 quarters of football.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's another big one. It's the run home is huge for us, and we've given ourselves the platform, a real chance at a lot more of a deeper finals jaunt than we probably expected a few weeks ago, maybe. So,
did you have a margin in mind? Sorry.
Oh, jeez, I did put a few out before. I'm thinking 40 points is where I'm kind of at. Like, I mean, I'm just trying to kind of find the balance between what my hopes are, which
What's
is
realistic.
and then like just acknowledging that sometimes we can, if we do just drop that little bit after a big win, which I'm hoping we buck that trend at some point. But 40 points is kind of where I'm between, because it could be we ended up in a scrap and won by 25-30, then I'd be like, whatever. But then I could easily see us winning by 10 goals if we play the game we can against a Melbourne team that, as I said, they're just a bit cooked. So
and I think that's where the last 2 weeks have been a bit different in the context of kind of some of the stereotypes that go along with our club. And under Ken is like the Carlton game. A lot of people have said, perhaps on a different night, and historically, Carlton kicked the 7 goals in the second quarter, and we might fight back a little bit, but we still let that lead and buffer stick and lose, unfortunately, based off one quarter, but we turned it. And then to the Sydney game, it's getting that large lead, but then
turning the screw rather than
flailing a little bit, and just steadying, keeping it at a steady, and as opposed to putting the foot really on the throat and going for the kill, which we did do. So it's you don't want to be lulled into some of this false sense of security or anything, but there's a couple of aspects, particularly with the last couple of weeks, of how we've won that would suggest that we're in a good mental space. And if we perform in this game with the same attitude as what we did against Sydney in particular, it's all there for us to take.
And importantly, we're reasonably fit and informed, so there's a lot of things in play for us. So,
people unlucky to be out at the moment.
Yes,
I haven't even looked at our injury list, which has probably been posted.
It's more or less like it's Soldo's got a week or two, but
Soldo's a test. Sorry to cut you off. Sorry,
he's a test now.
Marshall is a test, and then Mackenzie, Kyle, Marshall, Finlayson, and Powpepper are all done for the season. Which we already more or less knew. A bit disappointing about Mackenzie. He hasn't really had a great run of it this year. He's been injured, more particularly in the second half. But
hopefully.
But that just goes to show, out of players that we would be considering for AFL level, unfortunately, there's a group of them that just have to ply their trade in the SANFL.
And wait their chance, because it's a game that does present chances at the times that you least expect it. Sometimes with how injuries happen, but knock on wood, we won't have to worry about that too much, and we can continue on this little surprising, but also there was signs that this run of form could come, and thankfully we're starting to seize those opportunities. And yeah, it's another weekend that we can seize an opportunity and really build the platform to go into what's looking more and more likely to be a tilt at finals wherever we may fall. But yeah, this weekend's an opportunity to really solidify being in the upper echelon of that pack in the finals in what is a crazy season. So we never know what's going to happen, but I think we're pretty confident in saying that Port should be winning this weekend and winning reasonably well. Oh, it's been a fun episode, Jamie. I love doing these episodes when we win like that.
Yeah. I hope everyone listening and watching have enjoyed it. I hope we've done a good service.
Yeah, there was a lot to touch on in it, and we're obviously running under. We don't want to just run a 4-hour podcast as much as we could do it, but we are under time constraint as well. But we packed a lot in there, and it was a lot of fun to revisit that one, as it's been over the last 4 days, revisiting the replay over and over again. But yeah, another big weekend to come against Melbourne, and we'll be back this time next week to cover it all in what is hopefully another big Port Adelaide win. Nothing more to say, but fucking calm the pair.
Go Port, come on.
And they could